Last time on the Natter Chamber.
Hi.
Oh. Hey.
You look familiar.
They're coming. Don't tell them I'm here, and don't let them in the main deck.
We have a main deck?
I think I get it now.
No.
What the hell?
Wake up, slacker boy. What's going on? What is so funny? You have no idea what you're in for. But it's time to go home. Don't do this!
Where are you going?
Listen, man, I know you told me not to come in here and to wait long enough until it was time, but I think it's been enough time. I think I can't do this anymore. I can't. Oh, I forgot to talk about Scott Pilgrim. Okay, so in 2010, Universal Pictures. I think they're ready for me. I made a mistake a little while ago, putting my faith in someone I probably shouldn't have.
There are no others anymore. They're all gone.
No.
You think you were the only one punished for harboring a wanted criminal?
But that was my fault. I should be the one.
They need you to keep this place running. I'm afraid we're expendable.
Not to me. Not to me.
We've got a lot of fun stuff planned this year.
No! Is it over?
That's just what I was about to say. You know, we're actually more similar than
Thank you, Vent Man. Now I know what I must do. I gotta hunt down that purple-suited man and get answers and finally get redemption for everything he's done to me. Oh, and also talk about movies and cartoons and video games. Probably more video games than last time, because the cartoon one has been working out very well.
Did you leave? I'm just gonna assume you left.
There used to be a couch here.
Okay, so you get the point.
Wait a minute. How long have you been sitting there?
So, like, we're all good, right? You give me the box as a present for letting you know the location of the red one. It's not like I was harboring him or anything. I mean, technically, if we're being honest, you guys put him here under my watchful eye, right? I'm getting very bored in here. Don't worry, Andrew. He'll be back. It's only been a couple of months. What's the worst trouble he could have gotten into? I gotta get out of here, man. It's starting to smell like mysterious green powder.
All right, from here on out, we're in a new arc, and it's called the Andrew's Happy Arc. I am done with these gimmicks. I'm done with this lore. I'm done with this story. I'm going to be happy this summer, and I'm going to show you that is something I can... I got so caught up in the storyline and lore of H2O that I'm referring to my own real life as plot. That's silly. Oh, weird. How long have I been wearing this glove? I don't even remember putting it on. Ow, dude, what the f- All right, enough. Tired of talking to no one. Just once, I'd like to see something new. Is that a door?
Am I really gonna fall into a trap laid out so clearly in front of me? Okay, but if I walk into it and I'm self-aware of that's what I'm doing, like lampshading it, it doesn't actually count as getting trapped. Just know that I do keep him on me. He's just gonna bless my car. I'm not used to using audio equipment this small and feeble.
I am not cut out for this job.
Admittedly, I wasn't really watching this guy's videos in the early 20s. I had my own ship to run. That is a metaphor. It wasn't a literal ship yet. And luckily, and because it's my job now, I guess, all of these old videos of questionable quality have been archived here. Will I have enough time to make everything I want to make, to do everything I want to do? Will I even want to dedicate all my time to doing this show specifically? I don't know if you know this about this business, but we don't have a very long shelf life. We all saw what happened to the last guy who hosted this show. Speaking of Halloween, what would... There was always a handful of topics in a pile marked, I'll go back to this someday. Turns out today is someday.
But for me, I've got a invitation in purple I need to accept. I mean, statistically, hosts of this show only get about a month or so of freedom before they're found out. And they haven't found me yet.
Thank you for your patronage. And do not worry. The sun may set on us, but that scoundrel can't hide for long. We have the best detective on the case for this.
Right now on the Natter Chamber.
Okay, 20 seconds. A new personal best. I can beat that. How long have you been standing there? Were you just watching? I could have died.
It's like his lightsaber.
You haven't noticed, I've covered Star Wars quite a lot on this channel, and I can't believe they haven't caught me yet. But the last time we talked about the series was surprisingly not a full calendar year ago. No, the last time we spoke about this issue was my Force Awakens revisit, where regardless of the film's quality, my main emotional point was that Star Wars is a theatrical experience. Seeing a Star Wars picture on the big screen is a rite of passage. It only comes around once in an era. My first ever time seeing the spectacle on the big screen impacted me in a way that I can barely describe. A moment I would remember forever. Wrapping up a trilogy at the very end of the 2010s and the end of my teenagers as I stepped forth into adulthood. And since then, for 7 years, we have gone without another glimpse of Star Wars at the movies. Whatever they do next will have to be as culturally impactful as the previous trilogy. But now, there's gonna be a Star Wars in theaters, and I feel nothing. Maybe this one just lacks the pomp and circumstance. It won't have the opening crawl or the thunderous theme or the ending circle wipe. This movie won't even be filmed on actual ground. I've been avoiding it to the best of my ability for so long, but I think it's time for the truth to come out. I got no clue what's going on in Star Wars. I'm not saying I used to know the name of every character that would show up on every planet, but I knew why Darth Maul showed up in Solo. He was there to Aura farm. I do intend to fully return to The Rise of Skywalker when the time is right, but for right now, we just need to return to 2019. November 12th, 2019, Disney launches its new streaming service meant to compete with the largest digital libraries of all time, like Netflix and... well, I guess by this point, Disney owns Hulu. Out of the several streaming services that have come and gone in the last 7 years, and the ones that will probably fold within the next couple years, it's commendable and surprising that Hulu has lasted this long. The purpose of the service, and the selling point, was that tons of Disney movies, shows, and shorts that were previously locked away in the archive would be accessible with just the click of a button. But competition like Netflix didn't just have reruns of The Office and Friends. By this point, they also had award-winning series like Stranger Things, BoJack Horseman, Orange is the New Black, those seasons of Arrested Development I like to forget about. Disney is no small company. The name and logo itself forever etched into the eyeballs of every child around the globe. The library would be an easy sell for the time being. But if they wanted to take a swing at the biggest dog in church, they would need to beef up their own library of originals, and fast. November 12th, 2019, the start of The Mandalorian. I think movies like Rogue One and especially Solo really soured audiences on the concept of a Star Wars spin-off, but this was a TV show. We haven't had a proper live-action Star Wars television program since... I guess that HBO one got shelved, so never. It seems novel to think about it now with every Disney property under the sun getting a Disney Plus series, but long before there was the Santa Clauses, there was just The Mandalorian. And 2019 was a pivotal period for Star Wars, or rather Disney as a whole. Not only would this holiday season mark their first streaming original that was surprisingly great for what it was and critically acclaimed in doing so, but also the finale to their newest in-house Star Wars trilogy that had really fallen off the rails by this point. Spoilers for, 2029. The solution was simple. People liked the TV show, and they didn't like the movie. Also, everyone got really sick all of a sudden. To me, what works best about The Mandalorian in the world of Star Wars is that he's just a guy. He's not a Skywalker, not a Kenobi, not a Palpatine, not even a Jedi. He's just a Western movie hero. Also, he's got a cute, marketable baby sidekick. So obviously, Disney would learn their lesson from the fallout of the cluttered Skywalker and the simple creativity of The Mandalorian. Let's make it more Star Wars. Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, Darksaber, Luke Skywalker, Boba Fett, Cad Bane. I legitimately forgot that the Cad Bane scene I was looking for was actually from the Book of Boba Fett. I feel like I can't take the blame for this one. This is basically an extra season of The Mandalorian anyway. If only we lived in the universe where we got that Josh Trank version of Boba Fett. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, Ahsoka, The Acolyte, Skeleton Crew. You have to stand right there? If you want to understand anything in the cute new Baby Yoda movie, you have to do homework. It's come out recently across articles that the president of Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, really didn't want to make Marvel Disney Plus shows, but after the instant popularity of The Mandalorian, the president of actual Disney asked him to, and he didn't want to fight. For a moment there, it was sort of fun. Like, Mandalorian was veering off the rails, but it wasn't terrible. Then after a year without anything Marvel, after their pseudo-finale, which allowed people to take a breather, we got viral sensation, mystery, WandaVision. I liked Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I will still attest that Loki is a good show. Like, not just good for Marvel, it's a good show. Whereas Moon Knight is good for a Marvel show. Oscar Isaac from Star Wars, Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Secret AI Art, Echo, Agatha, Daredevil but bad, Ironheart, Wonder Man, Marvel Studios' White Vision, Kevin Feige's White Vision. I don't think you should call it that. None of which are still required viewing because they decided, fuck it, let's bring back Patrick Stewart. It's safe to say that the Disney Plus original experiment was a failed one. Like, have they actually made a high quality show that is exclusive to the service outside of Andor? And don't tell me any cartoons, because they all aired on TV. And this upcoming movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, marks the end of said experiment. I hope. Do I think that there's a possibility, a world where this movie is good? I think every movie has the potential to be good before I see it. But I used to really genuinely like The Mandalorian because it was something fresh and new, and I liked Star Wars. But now it has become abundantly clear that the upcoming Star Wars theatrical projects will all be Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau playing around in a toy box. Say what you will, for better or for worse, these two are the closest we're ever going to get to a modern George Lucas movie. He's not dead, by the way. He's still around and kicking. Star Wars is just dead to him. He called Disney white slavers. It's also abundantly clear that this new Star Wars regime really wants everyone to care about their super awesome epic OCs. That stands for original characters. If I even want a chance at understanding, walking into a movie theater and watching a movie, having all the puzzle pieces, then I will need to become acquainted with the likes of Ezra, Sabine, Chopper, Zeb, and to do that, I will finally need to bite the bullet and watch Star Wars Rebels. But I'm way too far behind for that. 3 years ago, we met here. You and I. Well, not I, and maybe not even you. I don't think the people that used to watch are watching anymore. For the first time in my life, I sat down to fully absorb everything about Star Wars The Clone Wars, Seasons 1 and 2. And I was so sick when making that. and not in a good way. I used to hate how that video looked and sounded, but now enough time has passed that I find it datedly charming. I feel like a lot of videos from 2023 are like that. In those total drama and musical videos, I guess I forgot that I needed the microphone to be at my mouth to be able to hear me. But I left off after season 2 because that's when the network itself changed. It was still on the Cartoon Network, but said network had gone through a sort of refresh. So actually, my original plan for the nudes era of Cartoon Network, those are those little white guys, I did not name them. My plan was to slowly and systematically talk about every show, every season, anything that aired during that era by jumping from show to show. So I jumped into Clone Wars with the intention of covering everything from 2008, and then I didn't finish it. Kind of a common theme nowadays. I'm always picking up the scraps. But now I'm actively working on nudes era / chowder / flapjack, a video of that sort, and I really have no excuse to not finish the Clone Wars. And speaking of excuses, when else am I ever gonna have the opportunity to come back to this? You think they're gonna make another Star Wars movie? But in the timeline, season 7 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the final season, actually aired after Star Wars Rebels had already started, and The Mandalorian Season 1, thus taking place after the purchase of Lucasfilm by Disney. So the gap in between is 4 seasons, which is about 77 episodes to get through. This is gonna be a long one. I don't know why I say that, like they're not all long ones. But Star Wars: The Clone Wars actually separates certain episodes into distinct arcs. But while the thesis of the previous video is that I vehemently disagree with the watch guides people make for the show, it will help to separate said episodes into groups. I'll be watching every episode, but as far as discussing them, I will be talking about that incrementally in their specific arcs, as opposed to taking time away to talk about every individual episode. Because again, there are 77 of them, but 3 years is a really long time, and I have since flooded my brain with creatures like Marfalump and Grumgar. So, as a quick refresher, war! And also some lemur people who oppose it. The first 2 seasons of Star Wars: The Clone Wars aired in the nudes era of Cartoon Network from 2008 to early 2010. And in that time, we saw how the show reframed characters from the prequel trilogy. Yoda into a wise sage who sees the Force in every living being. Plo Koon, who fathers that spirit. Kit Fisto is known to fly off the handle, ultimately resulting in the slaying of his former Padawan. Mace Windu is just as boring as he is in any movie or upcoming future streaming show that they're towing the line with. Padme and Jar Jar are having a steamy love affair on the side, but the real energy, the beating heart of this series, is the fostering relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan as they work together to get out of sticky situations, mostly involving pirates. Like Hondo Onaka, who has either adopted a young Boba Fett or joined his merry band of bounty hunters who want Mace Windu dead for offing Boba's dad. You'd think Cad Bane would be a larger presence in Season 2, considering it's meant to be the, quote, rise of bounty hunters, but the series isn't just developing Anakin and Obi-Wan, but their respective rivals. General Grievous is forced to run errands for Count Dooku, a conflicted former Jedi that is beginning to see through the lies of the entire system. The light, the dark, the Force, all of it, but still decides to take up a Padawan of his own in Ventress, to juxtapose Anakin's shiny new Padawan, which he shouldn't even really have, let's be real. Most of the new characters we meet through Ahsoka, Luminara's Padawan Barriss. They fight mind zombies together. I wrote a whole thing about Aayla Secura here because I forgot she was actually in the movie. She died in it. Speaking of, let's give it up for this old lady lightsaber librarian from the Revenge of the Sith video game. Oh, and the clones. All right, earlier I said that Anakin and Obi-Wan are the beating heart. I changed my mind. These guys are supposed to be the Clone Wars beating heart. They are in the title. Early on, we meet 2 new clones, Echo and Fives, and I know in the future we're supposed to really care about them, but they don't have nearly as compelling stories as my goats, Waxer and Boyle, or even Captain Rex and Cut. At the end of the day, in stories about nukes and zombies and huts and Jabo the Droid Whisperer and Force-sensitive babies and fake love triangles and Seth Green and Obi-Wan's ex-fling fighting for the power that comes with holding the Darksaber on Mandalore. No! At the very end of the day, the real story of Star Wars: The Clone Wars is about how much the battle droids on the other side of the battle lines are being used as cannon fodder just as much as the clones. But nobody cares about them because they're slaves of the bad guys, and also future slaves to the whole galaxy, and also not allowed in bars. In a previous video, I heavily implied that I wouldn't come back to watch the rest of Clone Wars, but not only was that before we'd be getting a theatrical film starring Ziro the Hutt, but also, as far as YouTube goes, the video didn't actually make that much of an impact. Like, I've had videos that don't break 10K, but they still have lasting legacy one way or another. But that video's lasting legacy doesn't have anything to do with YouTube. A video posted all the way back in 2023, still to this day, what I think about when I think about that video is the clip that got posted to TikTok. For whatever reason, that 1-minute clip from a nearly 3-hour video went way more viral on TikTok than it did on YouTube, and the comments were insane. I'm pretty sure as they're built, they follow their programming, but because of their intelligence, free will is inevitable, I guess. Are we seriously questioning whether or not literal inanimate objects should be allowed to drink at bars or not? Clanker lover. They're just droids. Clankers aren't sentient. Fucking clankers. I think in the Phantom Menace, they were more like single hive mind remote controlling droid bodies. I don't think it discounts their sentience. Droids are given pain receptors for self-preservation. Also, the whole bars thing was because of the Clone Wars. That person has a clone trooper profile picture. Well, if it's not human, I don't care unless they chill like that. I find empirically evil things completely blown over funny. Hogwarts game was a riot. Those goblins do deserve less. I wouldn't say they feel pain per se, more like they have an understanding that excessive damage equals no more functioning. So they have a sort of, the word you're looking for is the fear of dying. If the droids have free will, why can they not create new things or learn new things right? Because they have to follow their programming. I reiterate, these comments were left in 2023. I am very seldom on the cutting edge of anything on the internet, but I could say that I was being called a clanker lover years before anyone else was. That's nuts. Even more than that, it's bolts. Comments talking like droids are simultaneously real, but also it's completely okay and natural to hate them and mistreat them solely because they are a lesser class. I'm a trailblazer when it comes to people being mad at me. So that video's legacy was, for me, anytime someone asked me what the worst comment I've ever gotten was, I would show them that whole comment thread. We've covered every Clone Wars from the nudes era before we even went in depth with that entire time period. I'm still working on that retrospective, but I think I'm gonna go back to the original plan of just systematically covering everything that aired across those 3 years, and I should be done in 20 years. But now, not only do we get to jump into the Check It era, but we're building up to the time when Disney bought Star Wars, which I also talked about. Will droids be treated better in the first arc of Season 3? I doubt it. I ended the previous video all those years ago, precisely when I did, because it sort of lined up perfectly. That's because this double episode Season 3 premiere coincides with the very first installment of the biggest night of action. So many of my memories of the first 2 seasons of this series are the nudes era, and its Friday night action block titled You Are Here. I watched very little of that block, and I watched even less of the block that preceded it. But kicking off September 17th, 2010 with a double episode premiere of Star Wars The Clone Wars alongside the series premiere of Symbionic Titan, 2 shows that were on the verge of cancellation the entire time they were on the air. But we know how this story goes. Evidently, Clone Wars wouldn't stay canceled for long. I know in the opening of this piece, I predominantly talked about the live-action Star Wars outings in the streaming era. That is because, despite it all, I did everything in my power to try and get into the CG animated series, The Bad Batch. But I simply could not. I made this vent art 3 years ago. So these 2 episodes sort of act as the proto-formation of that group. Like, they say the name Bad Batch so many times. I know this is retroactive, but one man can only pull off the Leonardo DiCaprio gif so many times before they start to pull a muscle. You're pulling off DiCaprio? An advantage that Star Wars The Clone Wars has as a series is non-linearity. It's an anthology series set at different instances throughout the war, but for the most part, that's meant to be separate individual episode arcs. And that's mainly information that you only really gather by watching the show, or at least just letting the streaming service you're watching or the piracy service roll over to the next episode and watching the recap at the start of the episode to know, like, okay, this is a sequel to that one. But these episodes aired back to back on the same day. And these 2 episodes, the premiere arc, actually take place potentially years apart from each other. The first episode was meant to set up this Domino Squad, a plucky group of clone troopers trying to pass their final test. And then the second episode cuts to only 2 of them. The least interesting 2. I said before I wrote anything about this season that of all the named clone troopers I've met in the series so far, Fives and Echo are my least favorite. And then the first episode of this season does tremendous leaps and bounds to get you invested in the rest of the squad. The brash new leader cut up. I think one of them is named Droid Bait, and the heart of the episode. I know I've been using that turn of phrase a lot. The truth is that Ashoka is the heart of the show. The emotional one of the group, Heavy, forming a relationship with the wise, defective clone known as 99. At the same time, there's a concurrent plot as movie Jedi Shakti is communicating with the Kaminoans about how, since Jango Fett has died, they're running out of clones to mass produce. They're cannon fodder. And then in the actual stories, we get wise nuggets about how you never leave a fellow clone behind, but you just told us they're trying to mass produce even more so they can die. That one's name is literally Droid Bait. I know this is actually a clever way to add stakes to these clone troopers, because if there aren't an infinite number of them, not only can the tides of war change, but also we grow attached to the ones who stick around, and the ones who have nicknames. The second episode is set a while after, as General Grievous and Asajj Ventress are sent to Kamino to either retrieve or destroy the clone DNA. And out of all of the characters that fade into the background as the story gets crowded, I really do like their dynamic. We know from a previous episode last season that Grievous detests the idea of being Dooku's lapdog, and they're both acting like Dooku's spoiled kids who want him to praise them so bad. Anakin and Obi-Wan show up, they swing their lightsaber stickers on them, but the real stars of this arc are the future Bad Batch. Until they're not. Because the first episode is great, ramping up the emotional climax as 99 was the one to get them to rally as a team, and then time passes and the one closest to 99 is dead. And then 99 also dies, maybe. The big moment at the end of the Clone Troopers episode is when Heavy gives 99 his medal as a recognition of his spirit and advice, as well as an excuse to come back and see him again. And then he doesn't see him again, and they both die. So no one gets the medal. The arc still ends triumphantly as Echo and Fives join the ARC Troopers. I don't give a shit. Where is Droid Bait and Cut Up? You wanna know why they call him Cut Up? Can we replace these two with Waxer and Boyle? Echo's defining characteristic is that he repeats things. Echo's defining characteristic is that he repeats things. I really thought I wouldn't be able to tell them apart because they have the same voice and you can't turn subtitles on conveniently on Disney Plus on my TV. It's possible Heavy actually died in a previous episode that I've watched, but I didn't mention it in the video, so there's no way I'm gonna remember that. No, I have to point out the important bits, like how they call the bounty hunter on retainer Master Chief. Every time General Grievous said, "Kamino has fallen," I kept visualizing a Wojak over his face. So really, these episodes exist to prop up Fives and Echo. Unfortunately, 99 and Heavy are plot devices, and I really hate to talk like this because I hate when people view stories as like an ends to a means. It's like, no, the purpose of the story is to tell you a story. But I don't, like, they had to know these episodes were gonna air back to back. I don't need every episode and every arc to conclude with a happy ending to feel fulfilled, you know, we set free! We can have somber stories about war, but that's not what this is. Don't twist my words. I don't think these episodes were bad or boring. It's the opposite. I instantly fell in love with 99 and Heavy, only for them to be unceremoniously dragged off screen by a cartoon Kane. The first episode on our list to appear that's really just a one-off, no multi-episode arc or time skip or carryover, it's not even on the watch guide. By now you guys should know how I feel about these fan-made guides. At the end of the day, every piece of television is worth watching. However, this new episode, the second week of this new action block, September 24th, alongside a new Generator Rex in Symbiotic Titan and Batman the Brave and the Bold. This is a Bail Organa and Jar Jar Binks political adventure. This is season 3. I really thought we were never gonna see this dude again. And it's not even silly slapstick shenanigans. It's about humanitarian aid. How did they learn that word? Does it only apply to humans? It has human in the name. It certainly doesn't apply to droids. I was so stoked because the first shot we see in this episode are Twi'leks on Ryloth, and I perked up instantly thinking like, oh, we could catch up on Waxer and Boyle and the kid they saved. Are we gonna have a story about them again? And the answer to that is several hallways and round tables. If you looked at just the voice cast of this episode, you'd probably think it's really exciting. Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Count Dooku all show up to get one line and then fuck off. Yoda basically says, the Twi'leks have no escape. Dude, that sucks. Oh yeah, if you've never seen the films, this is the perfect... That guy's name is Han Solo, and he says game over. That's his catchphrase in the movie. Is whenever there's danger, he says, game over, man! Most people misquote it and say, I got a bad feeling about this, but that's not actually the quote. Bail Organa invites several politicians over to try and win their favor, and then leaves them alone with Jar Jar as their protector. That has to be grounds for starting a war alone. Okay, so this is crazy. This episode revolves around the kidnapping of one of the blue aliens who lives on Pantora. And you did hear that right. Pantora, not to be confused with Pandora, the planet from James Cameron's Avatar series, also starring blue alien people. The only Pantorans we see in these Star Wars movies are, I'm not joking, George Lucas and his family. And this episode, aside from Ahsoka going undercover to rescue one of the Pantorans, is predominantly about George Lucas's character pooling espionage with his Chud son. Is Chud son, who is voiced in this episode by one Seth Green. Is this a prank? Did they do this specifically for me? Is this meant to imply that Seth is like a son to George? Because one of his kidnapped daughters is inexplicably Australian. I know that Star Wars also has a ton of different accents. Surely there's a Space Australia somewhere. Yeah, it's called Pandora. I mean Pantora. But why does only one of his kids... Do they all sound different? And how has his wife not noticed? Unfortunately, Lucas's character is not voiced by the man himself this episode, although that would make it way more entertaining.
I wanna make my character blue. I wanna voice a blue character in the show.
But he's flipping over tables and solving mysteries and getting in shootouts with bounty hunters. I would accuse this of being a self-insert, but I know by now in season 3 that George does not give a shit about this show. He had bigger fish to fry on October 1st, 2010. You see how I snuck that in there? Almost the 2-year anniversary of the Clone Wars premiere episode, and thus the time they aired the Thumb parody on television. Outside of the movie, by the way, Jabba the Hutt's son is in this episode, and George Lucas even uses it as a bargaining chip with him. I know I'm the one who should be doing research, and that was the whole crux of watching this show, but what happened to his son? Because we see Jabba in the future, in the original trilogy, and he seems like a bachelor without any son to be seen. Speaking of the original movies, George Lucas and his robot chicken son hunt down a teenage Greedo to find the rest of their family. Coincidentally, young Greedo is also the name of the next Disney Plus exclusive Star Wars streaming show filmed exclusively on a PowerPoint slideshow. Lucas solves everything. I mean, he kind of has to. That evil-looking Tom Kenny detective I thought we'd never see again doesn't help, and Anakin immediately just defaults to saying, call the police, I can't help you. It's against the Jedi rules. How are you doing that? But it's not like this stops him from pushing Ahsoka to get involved and teaching her the valuable lesson of how to strategically switch off her body cam. They do that one cliche where it looks like they're about to get caught, and then it cuts to the character looking for them, and then it cuts to where they were and they're gone. And then said Hunter walks a couple feet, and they do it again. What the fuck are we doing? And why am I not watching Symbionic Titan right now? So I went into these with the belief that it is one cohesive arc because they both take place on Mandalore. If they weren't, then they wouldn't be placed back to back like this. But unlike the double season premiere, these two aired weeks apart on October 8th and October 15th, 2010. The only notable difference there is that Ben 10 Ultimate Alien returns from a hiatus on the 15th, completing the night of the 5 premiere action shows. But the episodes themselves are Padme goes to Mandalore to help Satine unearth the conspiracy about poisoning kids, and then an episode where Ahsoka goes to Mandalore to help Satine unearth a conspiracy using kids. And they're relatively unconnected and kind of don't have anything to do with each other up until the very end where Satine says she requested Ahsoka because Padme spoke highly of her, thus tying them together right in front of the goalpost. So Ahsoka is shipped to Mandalore to radicalize its youth into distrusting politicians, and then a wacky group of spooky Mandalore kids unearth a conspiracy involving their prime minister. Scooby-Doo style. They take it to Ahsoka, and she's like, "Are you guys sure you didn't just imagine that?" It's not just her. I know it's strange to include Ahsoka in the adults in the room, but it's like the second FNAF movie, if you've seen it. This is such a strange comparison, but if I'm forced to be like the nostalgia guy that tells the story of my life through the guise of cartoons, I may as well bring up the movies I'm seeing in modern day. That movie, the whole thing feels like it's written by a Fairly Odd Parents character, because every adult is either cartoonishly evil or absent-minded. Okay, this isn't even about Star Wars anymore, fuck it. A child comes to you distressed and crying about their friend going missing, and your response is to scream, "Hey, stop bothering me!" in her face. And that's what happens in this episode. Nobody believes them, especially not the teacher that taught them to distrust everything. The plot results in a ruse within a ruse. Ahsoka pretends to turn the children in and interrogate the Duchess Satine, but is caught by the new Prime Minister, who trained his knights to pretend to fall for her Jedi mind trick and instead capture Ahsoka. So his plan includes a lot of unknowns that he could not have possibly heard about. In all fairness, that is very Star Wars. But it's pretty clear that's what was going on, because when Ahsoka takes the kids to a prison cell, she says, "Quiet, we're being watched." And then they continue to talk about their plan out loud in earshot of the Mandalorian guards. Like, yeah, of course he found out. Ahsoka radicalized a group of young minds due to the recommendation of one Padme Amidala. That's cool, but I wish I could have seen them together in the same episode. Good news! Ahsoka is having dreams about Padme. Dreams about her being assassinated. The opening wartime intro flashes us back to the moment where Ahsoka Tano and Plo Koon believed they killed bounty hunter Aurra Sing. I was not aware that happened. It wasn't in my recap. But it's been several years for me, and the only word I have to go off of is my own, and I am famously untrustworthy. So Ahsoka believes she killed Aurra Sing, and now she's having smoky night terrors about her assassinating Padme. And I thought that this was actually going to be an episode about guilt, how the life Ahsoka took is worming its way back into her brain and eating away at her soul, and that the real nightmares are rooted in her inner turmoil. But no, Aura's just alive. But this time she's detained instead of killed, so I guess Ahsoka doesn't have to reckon with anything. This episode is actually about Ahsoka developing her Force magic. I mean, after meeting Yoda about her nightmare vision, she goes to the Jedi library to study up. The old lady librarian Jedi is there for a scene. I like their relationship, their rapport. But she isn't packing heat. Also, while we're at it, can we get some attention for Captain Panaka? Unless that's not Captain Panaka, and instead the character that looks and talks exactly like Captain Panaka but has a different name because the actor from The Phantom Menace didn't want to come back for other movies or asked to be paid more, which he probably deserved. We hardly ever see him anymore, and he hardly sees a couple feet in front of him. No, but I did miss him, solely because my friends and sisters and I used to call him Captain Pancake when we played Lego games together. Both Padme and Pancake believe Ahsoka and her visions, but Padme's convictions are too strong and she refuses to cancel any public outings. She's used to it by now. She sleeps next to Anakin Skywalker. That dude has a terrible vision nightmare every night. I like the continuation of movie logic where the Jedi nightmares work off of like genie rules. They always end up being true, but never the way you expect. This time around it's positive because, yes, Padme does not die before the events of Revenge of the Sith. Oh, thank God! Neither does Aurra Sing, evidently, even though she tried to Kirk the Senator. She has way more character this time around. Something about her almost dying and being rescued by Hondo made her way more sassy. Now she calls people kitten. Maybe she did that the last time we saw her, but again, that was years ago. It was honestly probably just becoming a stepmother to Boba Fett. That kid is oozing with sass. I've just been misreading everything about this adventure left and right, because there's a bit at the tail end where they sort of meet her halfway and ask Ahsoka what her next vision says, but she starts describing a vague, ominous, evil essence and a strange laughter in purple. And again, I thought this was going to be an ominous harbinger of things to come later in this saga, or somehow wrapping it back around so it makes sense that I talked about the FNAF movie. They're interlinked. But no, she's just literally talking about Ziro the Hutt. They end up being right, but imagine the profiling suit here. You immediately went after the only purple guy you know. I understand what you're saying, Your Honor, but I do have a source. It was revealed to me in a dream. But it seems like Ziro the Hutt is in jail. So what? They're gonna put him in even more jail? Super jail? Speaking of super jail, this episode aired October 22nd, 2010, along new episodes of Batman the Brave and the Bold, Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, Symbiotic Titan, and Generator X. That actually has nothing to do with Super Jail. I need to mention it. It's one of the big five. It's still every Friday night, but back when this block was known as You Are Here, it was built on the backs of Clone Wars and Batman the Brave and the Bold and Ben 10 when it looks like an anime and the Secret Saturdays. It's nice to know that most of those stuck around. This episode aired November 5th, 2010, alongside the other big four. I'm ripping that bandage off right now, okay, because it's gonna come up a lot. The evil plan from this hilariously simple title refers to Cad Bane and his droid sidekicks kidnapping C-3PO and R2-D2, who are set out on an errand. First point, Cad Bane's droid sidekick is still voiced by Seth Green, and this was before he played George Lucas's Chud's son. Also, I know this series is told out of order, but I swear we saw this guy explode. Remember when the droid exploded? Secondly, Anakin is the only one who treats these droids like they are people, which makes sense because he literally grew up as a slave as well. But the setup for this episode portrays C-3PO as more of a lovable, anxious butler and R2 as an excitable child. Like Padme is stressing over putting together a very important political party. Like a party for politicians, but not a, you know what I mean. Meanwhile, Anakin's just standing there, not helping, while trying to get her to calm down. And then she's additionally stressed because the dessert dish is missing some Joe Rogan fruit, and she needs someone to go fetch more. So then Anakin, in his noble proceedings, sends 3PO and R2 to do it. Even though he's not doing anything. You may view this as lazy on his part, and it is, but I choose to view it as he's the only one who thinks 3PO is capable of an errand of this weight. And I mean, he isn't. He gets captured and swindled almost immediately. Not particularly in that order. But it only happens because R2 runs off to a droid spa. A spa exclusively for droids, owned and operated by droids. What the fuck? Where has this been the whole time? So Coruscant has droid equality while Tatooine still views the... I'm gonna stop myself right there because that actually makes perfect sense. It makes sense that the planet where droids are banned from bars also just has human slavery. If you think about it, it's technically more equal. R2 runs off. I don't even know how this was a part of Cad Bane's plan. I mean, the way his droid friend sells the spa, it makes it sound like he's trying to get C-3PO to go inside. Even though he says, remember how shiny you were right off the assembly line? And C-3PO agrees, even though we know he was built on Tatooine by Anakin when he was a slave. Anakin Skywalker was able to build this guy in a cave with scraps. It makes sense that R2 is the one to run inside because even before it was brought up in the episode, I kept looking at that 3D model and thinking, man, R2 looks like shit. Is his texture always that dirty? I hadn't seen R2 in a while. But strangely, I think the answer to that question is actually yes. He's dirty as hell before this, and the next time we see him, he'll probably be dirty again. He's somewhere between an excitable child and like a... not a rabid dog, but a misbehaved dog. He bounces between being an excitable kid and a rowdy dog. 3PO immediately sells him out when getting captured. I don't think he did it on purpose, but I wouldn't even blame him if he did. Torture Julia, but it's an astromech. Also, responding to those TikTok comments, they were built to feel pain. Why did you build them like that? But R2 escapes because he is smaller and, again, more scrappier. More scrappier? More scrappy or scrappier. He's kind of like the Scrappy of the group. Surprisingly, or maybe not, considering this show, Cad Bane ends up winning, more or less. He gets the Senate floor plan from the droids and then wipes C-3PO's memory. How often does that happen to this guy? At a certain point, it has to mess with his executive function. Maybe that's why he thinks he was made on an assembly line. No wonder he's worried all the time. They stole his memories. I spent several nights trying to workshop a bit about droid dementia, but it just doesn't read at all. They can't all be winners. Cad Bane doesn't gain anything from these floor plans. He just captured them for Jabba, his most dedicated customer. But then Jabba officiates a video call with the other heads of the Hutt families that I didn't know existed, and in the end land on a new deal with Cad Bane to orchestrate the release of Ziro the Hutt. Okay, so they did just put him in more prison. In super jail. At first I thought this episode would be a goofy one, like Cad Bane would kidnap C-3PO or R2, and due to wacky shenanigans they would accidentally thwart his plans or he'd let them go because they annoyed him. But maybe, just maybe, the show is maturing with its audience, and it isn't that kind of show anymore. We just got a Jar Jar episode about diplomacy. I mentioned before that after a handful of years I seem to have forgotten everything that happened while working on the previous Clone Wars video, and it doesn't extend to just the show itself. The thesis of that video is that every episode is worth watching, and that the fan-made watch guides are not to be trusted. But I believe I have neglected my own words, and now I am paying the price for it. I assumed that all the important arcs would be marked on the several visual aids I found, like the 2 Mandalore episodes aren't highlighted as worth watching, but they are categorized as related. But then the crop of episodes between that and episode 12 are all just lined up without any adoptable flavor text. So when looking at that, I assumed that they were all separate one-off adventures, and they sort of are, but while spiritually unrelated, the last 2 episodes revolved around the fate of Ziro the Hutt. Well, goddamn it. I'm at least glad that we're focusing on the family now if I want to go into this new movie and understand what's going on, because based on the trailers we've seen, that other Jeremy Allen Hutt is either going to be an important, crucial part of that movie, or is going to be a 3-minute cameo. I think I took that double episode premiere for granted. We can no longer assume arcs will, in fact, be tied together. Because this episode aired on November 12th, 2010, following after new episodes of the other 4 action shows. That's not really what on its own means, but that's not my point. It gets worse. This episode is not the culmination of the plot to break Ziro out, because that already happened. It was the season 1 finale. I forgot. The gap between this video and the last time I watched that episode is longer than the gap between the season 1 finale and the season 3 finale. You can choose to view this as a personal failing. I choose to believe it's a quirk of the show. You'll tap into a new episode and then the opening narration will say, "Remember when Cad Bane broke Ziro the Hutt out of prison?" And you'll say, "No, but I'll take your word for it." After all, that's why we have the opening narration. I've said in the past that what I like about this show is that it clearly takes from Star Wars. I mean, it is Star Wars, so of course, but it also follows those threads into Star Wars's inspirations, leaning into the World War II-esque presentation and film serial aesthetic like the original films were an initial reference to. Like, we spend time in Jabba's palace this episode, and you know that means it has to be a musical number. You know he loves his dancers. But instead of the more promiscuous dancing of his slaves in the post-Clone Wars era, his dancers are more modeled after World War era flappers, and they do this big swing reveal of Snai Snoodles, which they only did for me because I love Snai Snoodles. Over multiple years of doing this as my career, I've come to terms with the fact that I just make videos for me, for fun, because I like doing them. And if other people can enjoy them, then I hope you come along for the ride. And you know, it's Clone Wars, so it's not going to do as well as the other ones. But I'm realizing that if this video is for people who already like Clone Wars, they're not going to like it because I have a lot to say about Clone Wars. And inversely, if it's for people who have never seen Clone Wars and don't really care, they're not going to care who Snai Snoodles is. She's the one that goes, that one. She's in the Max Rebo band. I do think that there are simply just different design philosophies when it comes to original trilogy aliens and prequel trilogy aliens, specifically Dave Filoni creations. I'm writing this video as he is currently being installed as the head of Lucasfilm, so this is sort of a testing ground. If I don't like his previous stuff, then I probably definitely won't like what he does with the new stuff. What I'm getting at is that beloved Obi-Wan is joined by another Jedi on a side adventure. We've had episodes where it's either Obi-Wan or Anakin or Ahsoka alongside a different prequel trilogy Jedi who sort of fades into the background in an attempt to flesh them out as characters, but we already had so many, and now we're just making more. Quinlan Voss is just a guy with face paint and cool hair, who Obi-Wan hates. Probably because he's got that goddamn Lego cut in that movie. Like, it's sort of played off as witty banter, but before they're assigned, he tells Commander Cody that Quinlan is crazy. He uses the word crazy. And then in the end, when they fail to detain Ziro or defeat Cad Bane, he says, "This is why we don't hang out." Like, I know it's supposed to be a pun. They're literally hanging after getting dog-walked by strictly not Jedi Cad Bane, but he sounds like a bitter ex. I'd say most of the time, if somebody is telling you a story about a person from their past and they use the word crazy, they're definitely exes. Every guy has a crazy ex-girlfriend story. Except for me. One, because I've never been in a relationship that has ended, and two, I'd like to think that I'd be the crazy one. I wear the crazy pants in this relationship. But listen, this one did get to me. That genuinely hurt my ankles. It wasn't the jump, it was the landing. Maybe it's all this uneven sand. This entire place is full of sand, and I just had, the camera is stationary, so you can't even tell. Got to me mainly because the undercurrent is about Nice Noodles breaking Ziro out of his hut prison his family put him in so they could run away together and be in love. I was rooting for them, and mainly just because I like Nice Noodles, but I also like the interpretation that she continued to have a singing job at Jabba's palace because she becomes like his step-aunt. She has tenure. In the end, love dissipates on the battlefield again as Sny shoots Ziro point blank in the head, but we don't see his corpse. So he may very well still be alive, by Star Wars rules. If Aura can survive that explosion, I'm erring on the side of caution. People are still cramping up for a Mace Windu follow-up. Seriously, if a character's body did not fade away or burn on screen, they will find a way to bring him back. I thought the last season was supposed to be the rise of bounty hunters. We just got 3 episodes in a row with Cad Bane and Aura Singh. Maybe it was supposed to be one arc. What the fuck does that mean? So the heroes on both sides line here actually is a reference to the opening crawl of Revenge of the Sith.
Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. War. The Republic is crumbling under the attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord Count Dooku. There are heroes on both sides.
This is one of those episodes of the Clone Wars that tries to salvage or recontextualize stuff that didn't really work in the prequel trilogy. It's a political episode, but unlike the previous political episodes in this season, it's actually about something. So this war, this Star War, has been bleeding both the Separatists and the Republic dry, and not in a fun way. They're being bogged down in senseless violence, and Padme goes on an undercover adventure in an attempt to foster peace and bring an end to this war. So it isn't as much there are heroes on both sides, as much as it is, why are we still doing the war? The initial character conflict comes from Ahsoka tagging along with Padme because after all, this is her show. As Padme goes to visit her friend who is actually a staunch separatist. Imagine going to Thanksgiving and your relatives pull out the "why can't we all just get along and not talk about politics?" Meanwhile, they're all wearing Count Dooku hats. And you could probably tell what they're going for. I mean, this senseless war continues due to an orchestrated act of terror in the largest city in the galaxy among insiders and disenfranchised victims of the Republic. I get it, very timely 2010, but that just doesn't work as an allegory in this specific example with the Star War. Because on one hand, they are absolutely right. This war is literally being puppeteered from both sides by an evil wizard who wears a big black cloak and shoots lightning from his fingers. But what they attempt to say in the context of this senseless violence doesn't really hit when the battle is between 2 mass-produced species of cannon fodder. Like, I know that the namesake of the Clone Wars is built around the fact that the clones in this series are people with feelings and ideals, and I'm the only one who seems to be fighting for droid liberation. Last person who did that, they trapped her consciousness in a ship for ever. There's a moment before the act of terror where General Grievous is giving the droids, which are all going to die because they have bombs hardwired into them. They were built to do so. They know they're going to die. A rousing speech. You could tell that he actually treats his droid battalion with respect, which is probably why he's the general. We hear a story from Padme's childhood friend that her husband was gunned down by clones for acting in self-defense. But all we've ever seen from this war are clones shooting droids and vice versa. Sometimes two dudes with lightsabers bash into each other like a Battlefront game, but it's mainly that. Like, I understand the characterization of the clones, and I have gone on and on about how much my heart cries for these droids, but the allegory simply does not work when the life being lost are mass-produced clones and robots. Like, I know that Jango's dead and they can't mass-produce more, but they have a lot of them. And I'm not saying you can't feel bad upon your favorite clone or droid being killed, but in an obvious allusion to real life, in a senseless battle where people's sons are being drafted just to die on the battlefield in the name of oil, I mean the Trade Federation. I've been writing this one for a while. Ahsoka builds up a relationship with the Separatist kid about her age, and they bond over the fact that neither of them have seen a real person on the other side until now. And then when they part ways, she says, "I wouldn't want to meet you on the battlefield for your sake." And it's supposed to be cute and cheeky, but he has no military training. Ahsoka, you're gonna kill him in cold blood? I'm obviously exaggerating the episode for comedic effect, but I think that my point still stands. The show clearly wants to be about something bigger, but for better or for worse, they are forced to work within the era they are given. They have to make up these Dooku supporters, and we have to pretend like they're making good points. I know that 2010 wasn't an election year, but this is the last episode to air in November of 2010, and November is always, you know, the politics month. I wonder if they did it on purpose. Knowing what we know about the way these episodes came out in the later seasons, I don't think they had control over any of it airing. Yeah, that episode aired as a part of the Night of Action block on November 19th, 2010, alongside the aforementioned shows that we keep showing. Do I need to have them jump up individually? Can I stick them together and jump up all as one, like, glob? And then they would take a gap week. The action night on November 16th, 2010 was shortened to only 2 episodes of over 1 hour, but that 1 hour marked the 2-episode premiere of Cartoon Network's newest action series, Young Justice. Okay, but that one will jump up separately. What a new exciting series. I hope it goes well for them, but this action block was actually preceded by an airing of the Star Wars The Clone Wars film from 2008, the theatrical film, as a part of the Thanksgivingest movie weekend ever. Meaning that technically, since it aired on the day we've been covering every week since we started this saga, this series, this could actually be the perfect time to properly talk about this theatrical film for Star Wars The Clone Wars. But that's okay, you can keep it. So everything I just said was entirely about the first episode of this 2-episode arc. The first episode that aired as a part of the Night of Action block actually aired alongside the new episode of Symbiotic Titan with the clip, the dance. I often repeat the joke ad nauseum, oh, this is this show's legacy, but that's not even really wrong in this instance. And the return to this arc in part 2 took place on December 3rd, 2010, giving it actually a 2-week gap where viewers had to wonder what happened. But not really. I mean, everything of interest takes place in the first half, to the point where when I wrote this at first, I assumed that this new December episode would just be an entirely standalone adventure. What do we learn in the second part? We learn that Padme's Separatist friend is dead, and that the war will continue. Sure. I don't think we need to see the fallout of the attack on Coruscant, because we know what happens. War! In all caps. I will say, though, that as you could tell by how long these videos get, I don't ever really edit my scripts. I just write from the rip. Whatever I wrote down, I'm going to start saying out loud. If I ever need to change or edit anything, I do it on the fly while reading the script. And I'm writing these episodes one at a time, having not seen, or these arcs rather. See, this is a perfect time where I could edit this. I don't finish the series and then write the script. I do it an arc at a time. And I can say that, like, oh, what's the point of the second episode? The point of the second episode is that Padme's friend's kid becomes radicalized and comes back quite a lot, actually. The one that Ahsoka threatened. Our first 3-episode arc of this new season, unless you count all of the Ziro the Hutt stuff as one, and also the first to be properly featured in the supposed proper watch guides. Airing after another 3-week hiatus, returning in 2011. We just completed all of 2010. How do you feel? Returning on January 7th, 14th, and the 21st. The first week alongside no other new episodes of anything, and the second week alongside the 4-episode premiere of Lego Ninjago. There is an entire underbelly of the Check It era that I did not care enough to have my ear to the ground. They were really attempting to make the next big action hit. I think they saw the writing on the wall for Ben 10. Or maybe they knew that they'd lose the rights to Star Wars eventually. What I'm getting at is, as a fan of Lego and also cartoons and also ninjas, I have never seen this show. But also, I'd do anything for money. Also, speaking of money and speaking of 2011, if only someone hosted a weekly watch party of this specific year of Cartoon Network exclusively on their Patreon. Hell, I'd pay a creator $1 million for that alone, or at least enough to pay their rent. Okay, let's talk about the Night Sisters arc. New OC alert, do not steal. The 3-episode arc titled by fans as Night Sisters, which is strange because it's only partially about them. That's not to say that the emotional core of the story shifts at any point, but just that the focus moves clearly towards propping up a new character for future stories. And even then, that new character kind of gets moved to the side when they realize they could just bring an old one back. It begins with Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku, getting a holo call from his master Sidious, who demands he parts ways with his current apprentice, the assassin hired to kill the Jedi, Asajj Ventress. This 3-episode arc is not only the scariest Count Dooku has ever been, but also the most compelling. I understand why he hasn't been to this point. He's really just been an antagonistic force, even when he's working with the main characters. Propping him up to face against other Jedi adds a wrinkle to their stories, but this can only go so far. This arc affords us the opportunity to follow Dooku for prolonged periods of time and understand his worldview, something the movies never really allow us to do. Out of all the villains in that trilogy, the only to appear across 2 movies, and in the movie we really don't know anything about him or what he's about. And that's ultimately the goal of a series like this, right? To flesh out the characters that we know very little about. And yeah, from a villain standpoint, the prequel trilogy has like 3 that aren't even the main bad guy. And all of their designs are really cool, and casting Christopher Lee as a swordsman in your movie is always a pretty safe bet. But in those movies, we don't actually know much about Dooku. We know that he used to be a Jedi who turned to the dark side, and we see the look of betrayal in his eyes when Palpatine orders Anakin to kill him. Also, his reaction to both his hands getting chopped off like he dropped a tray of pizza rolls. One time I was carrying a very hot plate of pigs in a blanket, and I was already having a pretty bad day. And the plate was so hot that it burnt my fingers, and I just dropped the plate, and it shattered on the impact, and all of the pigs in the blanket just rolled around the floor, and I didn't even react for a solid 5 seconds. I just sat there like this, and my roommates saw it happen. I'll be honest though, it's a little silly that a throwaway line from The Phantom Menace where Yoda says, "Always 2 there are," has since become Sith law. And it can't just be that, like, oh yeah, there often are 2. They often move in pairs. It is a strict rule that there can only ever be 2. But we know where the story ends up. Palpatine, as Darth Sidious, was actually grooming Anakin from a young age to be his Sith second in command, and he never intended to keep Dooku around. It's why he uses Dooku's death to push Anakin further. A source of conflict in the Jedi in the past episodes of this series is the separation of those close relationships. They cannot love another person to the highest degree, whatever that relationship may be, because it would eventually lead to anguish and anger and hate. Sorry, if you see the wall moving, it's because there's sand mites down there that are meowing and clawing at each other. We never hear about such rule in reference to the Sith, but they are supposed to be evil incarnate, draped in black robes and red lightsabers. But when Count Dooku is ordered to let Asajj Ventress die, you can see the pain he feels in doing so. But this is what I'm talking about. Dooku being a former Jedi who left the Order and joined the Sith, not because he's evil incarnate, but because he disagrees with the modern ways of the Jedi. He loves Ventress, but he chooses to cut her loose anyway. It's only after she attempts to kill him back that he locks in and goes psycho. Or rather, he doesn't. This is the most intimidating Dooku has been in any piece of Star Wars media, but it isn't because he's a loose cannon. It's actually because he never loses his temper. When he tells Ventress that he's going to kill her, there's no dramatic flair there. He's not saying it because he's angry. He's stating what he believes to be a fact. This arc, at least as far as this season goes, is probably the height of the series for me. I can only hope it gets better, but that is still yet to be seen. It helps that it's at least sort of about Ventress, the Night Sister. And I always love Ventress, specifically in the Gendy cartoon, but that can really be said about any of these characters. It's just nice to delve into the ones that don't get a lot of attention. But it's only after Ventress returns to her home planet of Dathomir and is immersed in her memories that we see her backstory. She was taken from her home as a child and raised in bloodshed before being taken in by a Jedi who trained her. And it was up until his death that I was sure it was Qui-Gon Jinn. Like, how many other Jedi have that exact accent and haircut? And you'd think it'd be a story about Ventress working together with the Blues brothers, we call them that because of the blue lightsaber, to take down Dooku, but she still refuses to surrender. She truly believes it is her life's goal to destroy the Jedi. However, this is behind the whole Mind Palace thing. Okay, so the reason this arc is called, affectionately, The Night Sisters, on top of that just being the name of the first episode in said arc, it's less that we get 3 episodes about Ventress and more that we get 3 episodes about where she came from. It's the Dathomir Arc. Dathomir is split into by gender. The women are all witches, Night Sisters, if you will, and the men are all trained and groomed into combat, where they are then picked by a Night Sister for, I think, mating? They sort of imply that later. It's a whole planet made up of evil, dominant women. If I really made this video a year after the previous Clone Wars video in like 24, a lesser, younger version of me would have done a bit about how I was desperately searching for the planet, but I'm old now. But the first episode is just Ventress going back to her roots and gaining the invisibility power-up and then failing to enact her revenge on Count Dooku. So instead of her backup plan, which doesn't even seem like her plan as much as it is Mother Talzin's plan, she's kind of the puppet master in this whole thing. This is Mother Talzin, by the way. Fun fact, her design in the show was actually taken from several pitch designs for the villain of the first prequel film, The Phantom Menace. It often gets equated incorrectly to being a beta design for Darth Maul, but this was a previous incarnation where the villain of The Phantom Menace, or at least the sub-villain, was supposed to be a Sith woman. It's also where Ventress's design came from. In retrospect, it's a pretty roundabout plan. So the second episode is all about these Dathomir cadets, a new crop of boys. A thick crop. What a crop. And it's clear to Ventress that the 2 standouts are brothers? They call each other kin, but I don't know if that means they're like father and son, or if every son of Dathomir is a brother. I shouldn't have said it like that. The Dathomir boys, Savage and Pharaoh. I have it written as Savage and Pharaoh. I know Savage is pronounced Savage. I haven't watched the episode in a while. Maybe it's Pharaoh. John Pharaoh. So we have Savage and Asajj Ventress. But upon these two's training, it becomes undeniable that the boys' weakness is their deep care and love for each other, but Savage is still the stronger one. And I gotta say, I know that this is still only season 3. I was always told that this show upped the ante when it came to writing and emotion. But I always assumed the animation itself would sort of plateau until the technology gets better. Like, the reason we were able to get episodes like this is because they already thought they were going to be canceled. Why would they get more money? But I guess it goes to show that even through 3D animation, it really just takes proper art direction. You don't necessarily need bucket loads of money to make something look good. Maybe it was just enough to light a fire under their asses, because at times the red night sky with speckled stars on Dathomir. It looks downright beautiful. So Savage vows to serve Ventress and the sisters as long as they promise never to hurt Pharaoh. Or Pharaoh. And then they take the young Dathomir boy and chain him down on their magic table to do magic on him magically. It's a horrific process with his body painfully stretching and contorting that is immediately undercut by a hidden Wilhelm scream. Like, I know it's a Star Wars reference. It's just become a Star Wars thing by this point. But am I supposed to find this scene funny? Then mission accomplished. I thought it was really funny that it made Savage more buff and transform in one of those mewing influencers who chew on rubber all day and hit their face with a hammer. Savage is now fully under the influence of the Night Sisters from the Night Sisters arc, and to prove it, he is made to kill Pharaoh where he stands. The boy sacrifices his own soul to protect his. So we see Savage invade a Jedi temple like a one-man army, and later we hear that he killed 2 Jedi. We don't know who they are, so they probably weren't important. Let's say it was Sin Dralig and Sarah Kato. They're not gonna show up in this series. So the plan is that the Night Sisters set Savage up as a sleeper agent and then offer him to Dooku as his new apprentice. Which seems confusing, when this arc was kicked off because Sidious just made him dump his last one, but we quickly learned that Dooku is actually planning to find a protege to help him usurp Sidious. It's not just that he can sense his betrayal incoming, it's more, I like to think, that Count Dooku just wants an order to oppose the Jedi and tear them down. It kind of seems like he wants to do away with both sides of the Force, at least where they currently stand. His heart clearly isn't in all this evil stuff, as opposed to Christopher Lee, who isn't an evil person, but clearly relishes in being a cunty evil guy. Weirdly, it's like that one episode of Moral Oral where they go to a Satanist meeting, but instead of being dedicated devil worshippers, they all just find the church really oppressive and want to do the exact opposite, like being fat and fucking in group settings. My tastes have since changed. That planet I will be searching for. But in the third and final episode of the arc, we switch perspective to Anakin and Obi-Wan. Kenobi is shown a crystal ball vision of Savage killing dozens, and at first he thinks Darth Maul has returned, which honestly is a crazy assertion. They kind of don't look alike at all. Imagine showing a video of a black man to someone you know and their first response is, "Holy shit, Kobe Bryant's back." Obi-Wan shows no remorse in killing this Maul, but clearly there's some tension and trauma there yet to be unpacked. So Anakin and Obi-Wan immediately go to Dathomir to do some more profiling. And in the final act, after Dooku sends his new apprentice to bring back Watto alive, and then Savage kills all of the Wattos, I think I'm being guilty of what I just accused Obi-Wan of doing. What if Watto's the only Watto that acts like that? What if the rest of them are normal and cool? Also, what if Watto is the only Watto that sounds like that? When Asajj Ventress shows up to activate Savage, the sleeper agent, to take out Count Dooku, but even with the rage of the two former proteges combined, they cannot take down Count Dooku, who stands his own up until the moment Savage chokes them both, and then it becomes a triple threat match. Ventress barely escapes with her life, having failed to assassinate Dooku yet again. There's a tragedy in a foregone conclusion. Like, we know that Ventress isn't in the movie set after this, but Dooku is. He needs to die by Anakin's hand for that movie to happen. The first video, when I talked about Clone Wars, it was hazy memories of seeing a handful of episodes, but I was sure I did not see anything past that. And I have kept up that streak of not watching any Clone Wars until this very video, but I did try to keep up with modern Star Wars animated projects, so I know that Ventress is alive in the original trilogy and has a kid, because every gruff, jaded character has to have a kid now. Forget the Battle of Yavin, forget anything about Star Wars. As far as entertainment goes, every TV show is separated into a pre-Last of Us world or a post-Last of Us world. Even God of War is Last of Us now, and that's also getting a show. Also, I may just be hearing things I want to. Granted, I didn't want to hear that Wilhelm scream earlier, but I swear there's a little motif of Battle of the Heroes in there. It's the song that plays when Obi-Wan and Anakin fight on Mustafar, and personally, I kind of like it more than Duel of the Fates, but maybe I'm just trying to be different. Just making sure I don't fit in. Rubbing and rubbing on my yellow leg. You may be thinking, however, but these guys aren't heroes. How soon we forget. There are heroes on both sides. So Count Dooku alerts the droids that Savage is a traitor and to stop him for good, which they cannot do as he tanks all of their blasts.
You're not supposed to be here.
In the end, Savage escapes back to Dathomir in Count Dooku's strangely shaped spaceship. I was wondering where that went after Attack of the Clones. We see Dooku beat 3 Jedi in that movie, and he's still nowhere near as menacing as these 3 episodes alone. I'm writing these one arc at a time, and I guess it is kind of true now that I'm thinking about it. It feels like the Night Sisters actually set Ventress up, and it was always their intention to create one warrior in Savage. It makes the most sense, considering how she ends this arc alone, but if that turns out not being true and she just fucked everything up, boy, would that suck for her. And it's here where it's finally revealed, I say finally, we're still in season 3, that it's revealed that Savage has a still living brother, Darth Maul. Unclear if they're actually related brothers or if they just call each other that. We don't see where he is or how he is now, but Mother Talzin, you know, the Avatar Fire and Ash looking one, says that he is still alive and sends Savage Opress on his journey with an ancient talisman that acts as a compass for his fallen brother. And this is honestly the moment I've been waiting for. I led you all to believe that I returned to the series because I gave a shit about Anakin or Captain Rex or Ahsoka or Cad Bane, but no. I decided to give it another chance. And then another chance 3 years after that is because I knew eventually, somehow, Darth Maul would return. And I know I'm always the one to say that you should never let nostalgia cloud your judgment. I'm not worried about new regular show because of the animation. I'm worried about new regular show because I don't really want to see more regular show. Whatever it takes for people to get work. All of that being said, I think Darth Maul is rad as hell. You know, in theory. Another 3-episode arc aired across 3 weeks on January 28th, February 4th, and February 11th in 2011. And I want to do a quick thought experiment. I know I've been rattling and tossing around the term about the original intent of this project, but at this point, the intent doesn't matter. But I ultimately landed on doing, after several years and multiple attempts in getting into the show, I would ostensibly commission myself to watch it all for work. That's really why these videos exist now, as an excuse for me to do something. Because when it's work, I have to do it. So the video itself didn't have a well-formed thesis initially beyond just me making myself do something, and that eventually became me discussing the fan-made watch guides and how the philosophy is fundamentally flawed. I think every episode deserves to be watched because that's the show. By no means am I going to say that these episodes are bad. A big contrarian take where this 3-episode arc with high reviews is secretly garbage, but no, it's pretty good. But I would like to use it as an example as I continue to talk about fan-made watch guides and orders. A little bit ago, in a, Patreon server, I wanted to try watching Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, that entire universe, in proper timeline order. I've already seen both shows a couple times, and I heard of people placing the series in this proper order. But once you start actually looking into what people determine as timeline order, and by that I mean what subreddits determine, you realize it starts to get in the way of authorial intent. I saw one poster on Reddit say that for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul to both be in the correct order and avoid spoiling the series, certain scenes would need to be cut outright. The interesting thing about prequels is they aren't just movies that take place before other movies. They are set before a period of time that we know well. They are still made with the knowledge of what happens in the future. While I believe that each individual series stand on their own quality foundation, you are meant to have seen Breaking Bad before watching Better Call Saul. Which brings us back to Star Wars and the funky watch orders I have seen people put together. This is an ever-present argument. What order should the movies be watched in? Some say the prequel trilogy and then the original trilogy, since that's the order they occurred. Some say that you should watch the first movie and Empire, and then after the Darth Vader reveal, jump back to the prequel films. Many say you can skip The Phantom Menace altogether, although it is a better movie than Attack of the Clones. But if you ask me, on a pretty simplistic, a very basic level, the movies should be watched in the order that they were released, because that is the order they were made. During the pandemic, I saw a lot of videos of guys showing their girlfriends Star Wars for the first time because they're in lockdown and thus cannot escape their boyfriend's terrible taste. I try not to be gender essential, but these videos are propaganda for the average straight guy. Guys want nothing more than to be the one that gets to show their girlfriend something for the first time. To a not insignificant amount of people, specifically online, the perfect partner is someone who is beautiful and intelligent and conversational, but has also never heard of Radiohead or Nirvana ever. Anyway, it's cute fun when couples share interests. But a common trend I saw amongst these viral videos was the full story watch order, which is Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, all of the Clone Wars show, and then Revenge of the Sith. And in theory, that would make sense. You get more time with these characters in a more charming and lower stakes environment before shit goes fully off the rails. I've gone on record before in that last video that I think Anakin is way more charming and relatable in this show, and his friendship with Obi-Wan is more believable because of that. To the point where it seems to have given a lot of people false memories about that 2005 film. So this is a good idea. In theory. For those of you who don't know, which sort of included me, I've obviously heard about this arc before, like most of the most popular arcs from the Clone Wars. People talk about it all the time, say it's one of the best. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka end up on this psychic force planet and meet physical embodiments of the light side, the dark side, and the balance between them. But I always thought this was 1 episode, maybe 2. I don't think it was bad, but I definitely do think they could have buffed it down to 2, but I digress. The first episodes, the trio are separated and treated to visions of Qui-Gon for Kenobi, Shmi, Anakin's mom, for Anakin, and an older version of Ahsoka for Ahsoka. She does say that it's a representation of Ahsoka's potential, what she can become instead of what literally will happen, which makes more sense because now we know what future Ahsoka looks like, and she doesn't look like that at all. She looks like a live-action woman. I'm pretty sure that the Qui-Gon ghost is an apparition created by the Force family and their planet, but it very well could also just be Ghost Qui-Gon. But I thought that Obi-Wan learned that Force users could become ghosts at the end of Revenge of the Sith, and then the ghost of Qui-Gon visits him in that one Disney Plus streaming Obi-Wan show. By the way, I was completely shocked that they got Liam Neeson back for that Disney Plus series, completely unaware that they apparently also got him back to play Qui-Gon in this episode. You got Liam Neeson for your Star Wars show that aired on Cartoon Network in 2011. Alongside Generator Rex. The light, the dark, and the in-between are represented by the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Son, the embodiment of the dark side, is also voiced by the guy who played Starkiller from The Force Unleashed, and he will come back later. I know I just joked about how every video game character now has a kid they gotta take care of in the apocalypse, but every game looked like this in 2008. You could plop Starkiller in Infamous and no one would even notice. Surprise, surprise, the son betrays his family and attempts to kill his dad, thus breaking the balance of the Force. The balance is brought up a lot in this episode, which means it's time for us to put on our media literacy glasses for a moment. The prophecy as it exists in the prequels is foretold that Anakin will bring balance to the Force. When Qui-Gon, played by Liam Neeson, shows up to both Obi-Wan and Anakin, he recounts this story, this legend. In Kenobi's first interaction with the son, he pulls out a lightsaber once he mentions the prophecy. The idea of balance in the Force is hotly contested, a lot like the proper watch order. In this episode, they say that too much of either side would lead to total destruction. Even though the arc ends with the son just dying by Anakin's hand. Spoiler, but, you know, we're this far into the video. I'm underselling it. There's a lightsaber fight between a possessed Ahsoka and her two dads, and a wizard battle between the siblings. It's actually really fun. I was always under the belief, the interpretation, that Anakin did bring balance to the Force. I didn't mean to do that. It was way more unbalanced before he killed all those Jedi. He was doing a service when he murdered those kids. The prequel trilogy ends and goes into the sequel trilogy with 2 active Jedi and 2 active Sith. And Ahsoka. And Maul. And Cal Kestis. And Grogu. And Kanan. You see how this kind of retroactively undercuts a lot of tension from the original films? This could all be avoided if they just bothered to have stories take place after the original trilogy, but everyone's scared of dealing with Kylo Ren. Anyway, they really nailed down the prophecy with these ancients in these episodes. The father, who represents the balance, asks Anakin to take his place after he has shown mastery over both sides. Heroes on both sides. But Anakin refuses and all hell breaks loose. For a moment, I thought, oh man, is Anakin supposed to literally bring balance through peace, and then the action of him turning the father down changed the trajectory? Did that change the prophecy? But then later on, the son shows Anakin visions of everything that is going to happen. Not happen because of your choices. No, it was always destined to happen. It was always going to happen. But then at the end of the arc, the father just wipes Anakin's memories before he himself dies. I heard a lot about this arc, but I didn't hear that part. I can understand why. It makes it seem really stupid. Because he doesn't wipe Obi-Wan's memory, and he had an encounter with this yellow-eyed Sith Anakin who's seen the future. Do you think when they were on Mustafar that one time when he was listening to Anakin's speech, he thought, well, deja vu, this is really familiar. For better or for worse, only Ahsoka really gains anything from this experience because, you know, Anakin's memory was wiped. And that makes sense. Within the confines of this timeline, she's really the only one who can grow and change. We know where the other dudes end up. Deja vu. So this arc isn't to serve the characters, it's to show you cool shit, teach us more about the Force, and reference the movie from 2005. Which brings me to my ultimate question for this arc. If I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who has never seen that 2005 movie, or any Star Wars for that matter, and is making my way through the Clone Wars and has been surrounded by pop culture most of my life, what am I meant to think? I see Anakin have a vision of becoming Darth Vader, so I think, oh, he becomes Darth Vader. The character I've seen on mac and cheese every day since I've been alive in America. Like, does that not hypothetically ruin that character turn at the end of Revenge? But that's my point, really. These episodes were clearly made for people who have seen Star Wars. It was only 2011. The wound was still pretty fresh. Imagine if they released a Star Wars show about Kylo Ren in 2027 and made a big deal about his heel turn as a character twist. In the moment, while I envision myself in the body of someone who has never seen Star Wars, I, maybe for a split second, for a moment, forgetting about what comes after, believed it could be an alternate reality. When Anakin is possessed by the dark side, but before he gets his memory and all of his development wiped, I thought, again, for like a second, oh, what if this show is actually a split? What if this is the moment Anakin turned to the dark side? Instead of the movie I've seen a dozen times. At the time, in 2011, having not seen the rest of the episodes, it would make sense for this to be an alternate timeline. I mean, most Star Wars media outside of the movies were soft canon that you weren't really meant to believe anyway. The aforementioned edgelord known to most as Starkiller. And I don't know if you noticed this, but Ahsoka does not show up in Revenge of the Sith. If this arc doesn't amount to anything for the characters, at least we could say it's another drop in the bucket of Anakin caring about the droids because he was actually a lot like them and can relate to them, because now his memory is wiped just like 3PO's was. It's a very lore-heavy arc, and I don't mean that to mean it's about Star Wars. I mean that to mean it's about stuff you'd read on Wikipedia late at night. Like, I feel like it exists solely to be a footnote in like a Silmarillion somewhere. Oh, so there's 3 spirits on a planet that represent the light, dark, and the balance. There's a dagger that can be wielded by a chosen one to defeat any of them. This is gonna sound really, really strange this far into a Star Wars video. It's kind of like the Bible. Like, I'm not religious, as you can tell by my sinful lifestyle choices. But the truth is, for the average guy you meet that's Catholic just because his parents were and were raised like that is, listen, these legends are meant to just teach us lessons about life. There's no way that every human was created from one man and one woman. And you think that this story is kind of like that, but no, this is literal. There is a spirit of the light side, and you can meet her right now, and sometimes her brother turns into a goblin or a dragon, but not anymore because he is dead. Also, his dad is dead. We've gone really full throttle with these 3-episode arcs now, huh? So these episodes are sort of important, but that doesn't necessarily make them compelling. But before we can get into that, the most important part you've been clamoring for, when these episodes aired in relation to the network. This arc is important because while the first episode of it aired February 18th, 2011, the week after was actually interrupted by the first ever Cartoon Network award show, the Hall of Game Awards, hosted by Sir Tony Hawk himself. But then back to regular programming the next week, and then a week after that on March 4th and March 11th. But this arc isn't about the Hall of Game Awards. It's about Evan Peel. Evan Peel, the guy who only appears at the end of The Phantom Menace and looks like this. The other little guy that hops in the green lightsaber. A character with 0 lines in that film trilogy, which affords the staff of the Clone Wars to be able to create a voice for this Master Jedi. And evidently they landed on Russian. He does a Russian accent. He's from Space Russia. And in any other arc that would easily be the strangest voice direction, if the bad guy they were set up against didn't slip into Christopher Walken impression half the time. So the plan here is to rescue Evan and General Tarkin from a super high security Jedi prison for Jedis only, the Citadel, from the title. Even though we don't see any other Jedi here, just a lot of droids and that alien tiger thing from the Attack of the Clones Coliseum. What's our creature counter at now? I lost track years ago. A mission that could only be accomplished by Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka and a bunch of clones. I feel like this is the arc everyone points to when they want to make a point. Like, oh, you think this cartoon on the Cartoon Network is for children? Well, actually, people die in this series. Meanwhile, at the time, regular show was blowing up normal human people for fun. Every other episode. There's a scene from Mad where they crush Lightning McQueen to death. It stuck with me. I understand the argument, I really do, especially when so many people are reductive about animation in general, but does people dying actually make the show or the episode any better or worse? or is it just meant to make it seem more badass and edgy? It's like when people are trying to fluff up anime and they choose to do so by putting down other cartoons, when we all know SpongeBob solos Naruto, in quality and in fight. And the thesis of the series is shown in the very first episode, the top of the series, that clones are feeling creatures whose lives have value. But somehow, in this entire arc, when the only characters who die, with one exception, are clones, and the only one I care about is the only one that gets a name, it reigns a little hollow. And by the way, spoilers for myself, I guess, but the one who supposedly dies is Echo from the Clone Cadets, who I'm pretty sure shows up in the Bad Batch series. Not to sound like a broken record, but you know, unless we get Liberation, I'm gonna keep fighting. What of the droids? R2 gets to lead a group of reprogrammed battle droids in this arc, and only now are we legally allowed to find them cute, because they're on the good side.
What is your cargo?
What is our cargo? Supplies and frozen rations.
Like, aside from the dying, which I'm told happens all the time in this series, I don't like to talk about stories, pieces of art, in an analytical, purpose-centric discussion. Like, oh, how does this move forward the plot? It is really based on characters and telling a compelling story. But the story, So mainly the purpose this arc serves is to connect Tarkin to Anakin. The whole time right in front of our faces as the characters wink at the camera. You remember the movie you've seen? It doesn't make sense if you watch this first. And I might be a hypocrite a little bit, because I find the return of Evan Peel really charming, but the Carbonite sequence really annoying. I'm purposefully dismantling my own argument in a bad faith manner. Obviously, it's fun to see Evan come back because he doesn't have any lines, he's a background character, as opposed to this that is just pandering. They need to sneak into the Citadel without being detected as life forms, and they do so by freezing their entire group in Carbonite. Now, this is pretty common in the prequel films to run headfirst into ideas that work in the context of the original trilogy, but change the context once they've made it in the past. The example I always use is that Obi-Wan wears robes in the first movie because he's in the desert and he's an old wise wizard. And then when the prequels came around, all the Jedi just dressed like that. And I've learned recently that this actually wasn't a George decision. He wanted them to look more like knights, a knightwear, something that Luke wears in Return of the Jedi, but then someone else got in his ear and said that they should all wear the robes. And maybe they were right from a stylistic standpoint, but then it sort of negates him being in hiding in the original trilogy because he's just wearing a Jedi outfit. Similarly, I was under the impression that freezing Han Solo in Carbonite was inhumane because no one had ever done it. Freezing was primarily a process for hauling cargo. They just happened to have the Carbonite machine on Cloud City at the time. But this arc, in doing so, implies that they freeze people all the time for fun. Anakin and Tarkin bond over the belief that the Jedi should not be bound by government. Then Tarkin says that he respects the efficiency of the Citadel, and it's only horrific because it's in the wrong hands. And then Anakin agrees, and Ahsoka looks at the screen and says, this is just like Star Wars. Also, Ahsoka is there, even though Anakin forbade her, but she sneaks into Carbonite Nation somehow, not the nation of Carbonite. And then at the end, Plo Koon vouches for her, even though by all accounts this was an abject failure. This is so upsetting because I'm filming these in like 20-page intervals, and there's legitimately 2 lines left on this last page, and I'm starting a new video now, because it stops every 21 minutes. But yeah, an abject failure. Evan Peel is killed, and then they hold a short ceremony for him, and they say they should keep going because he would have wanted us to complete our mission. But your mission was to rescue him from the Citadel alive. It's over, man. You failed the mission already. In his final moments, Evan whispers a secret to Ahsoka that she refuses to tell the government. And meanwhile, Tarkin has the other half of the secret that he refuses to tell the Jedi Council. The secret is probably that in the prophecy, Ezra is going to defeat an Inquisitor someday, or whatever happens in that show. The arc ends with Tarkans and Anakin shaking hands. I actually write these scripts phonetically, just in case. I know this isn't important at all, but during the opening narration of the second episode, you know, that wartime ticker tape, the voiceover says the words Republic and back to back really quickly, and it sounds like he's saying Republican. And we march forth Did somebody say March? Well, it's April now, April 1st, but seemingly the only fool is me. So I'm not convinced that these two episodes even have anything to do with each other, but they both aired on the same night as a two-part season finale, lumping them together as the final arc of the season. What a relief to go back down to 2 episodes. But this 2-episode arc is Jedi propaganda, and I'm not falling for it. So Ahsoka, Anakin, and Plo Koon go to a planet known as Felucia. I guess the Jedi Council doesn't trust Anakin to foster a Padawan anymore, so they send Ahsoka's real dad with them. And it's a basic mission that gets upended when Ahsoka is kidnapped by a Trandoshan gang. They're lizard guys, Bosk the bounty hunter from Empire, that type of guy. And very quickly, Ahsoka meets other kidnapped Jedi younglings, where she learns that they will soon be released and hunted by the Trandoshans for sport. And these younglings are covered in soot and grizzled and cynical, likely because they've been on this planet for so long, which they imply later by saying that Ahsoka is the first to come here in a long while. And the rest of the adventure is for the younglings, Ahsoka and her new friends Khalifa, Omer, and Jinx working together to escape the hunters. It's only through Ahsoka's leadership skills and faith that they manage to get out unscathed. Except Khalifa, who dies by getting shot. But of course Ahsoka would act like that. Of course she would have faith that they would return home. She just got there. The other were kidnapped as children and left to rot. We see later from the Jedi perspective that Anakin is conflicted about leaving Ahsoka to die on the planet, but evidently not that conflicted because it takes one Plo Koon speech for him to leave her there. They could puff out their chest and be so proud and say that they knew all along that Ahsoka could hold her own, but I know that's not why they left. Hey, what about this? Where are the other younglings masters? They didn't bother looking for them. Seriously, how long have they been on this planet? Khalifa's about to kill one of the men hunting them, and Ahsoka says, no, it's not the Jedi way. Girl, who gives a shit about the Jedi? We've been living off of sticks and mud for our entire teenagers. Also, Khalifa dies. Khalifa is killed by a Trandoshan father of the Trandoshan that the younglings killed. I guess killing in self-defense is okay, because Jedi work off of NRA rules and regulations. And I see what they're going for. The kids are acting out of strategy, and the father is acting out of anger and revenge, which ultimately is his undoing. But that's not really what happens. The father isn't defeated because he's blinded by revenge. He's defeated because Chewbacca from the movies shows up and bodies him. It's sort of a useless question to ask now because it's pretty inconsistent across the universe and in the end, doesn't matter. How come Ahsoka is the only one who can understand him? And Chewbacca hung out with a lot of Jedi in his time. You'd think he'd have something to say about Obi-Wan. Or he just doesn't care. He's been alive for generations, which honestly just makes me respect him more. So the Quad sort of rescue themselves, of course without the one who died, and now adding the big hairy muscle on their side. The only thing the Secret Saturdays had over this series. No wonder that one is ending within the year. And Chewbacca is presumably about to kill some guy, probably by ripping his arms and head off. And it's the other 2 Lost Boys who are like, no, this isn't you. And then Ahsoka says, fine. Fine? What happened to the Jedi Code? What happened to the rules? You're okay with killing this guy? Khalifa is dead. When they board the Trandoshan ship later, they toss a ton of dudes off the edge, where they likely plummeted to their deaths. You can't kill out of revenge, but if you happen to toss a guy and you can't see his corpse, then it's all fair game. At least by Cartoon Network standards. If you want to argue that it's actually okay because they're killing out of purpose and not out of emotion, I'd argue that makes them even bigger psychopaths. And more Wookiees show up to save Chewbacca and co, and basically just kill everyone else. Ahsoka returns to her master, and I don't want to say she forgives him. Not because she holds a grudge against him, but because, from her perspective, there's nothing to forgive him for. She also doesn't see anything wrong with this entire institution being left behind on a planet to fend for herself. Instead, she understands why Anakin left her behind on Felucia. But I don't. So where did Jinx and Omer go now? Do they get reshuffled into different Jedi? Do they get returned to their masters who left them? That'd be a little awkward. Surely they've moved on by now. What if they're too old to train? I'm legitimately concerned. What happens to them now? Which marks the end of Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 3. But unlike the gaps between Season 1 or 2, or even Seasons 2 and 3, the network remains relatively unchanged in its absence. For the 3 seasons that air as a part of the Check It era on the Cartoon Network, the schedule is pretty consistent. with an exception. A new season begins airing right before fall and then wraps up by spring of the next year. So we're only jumping from April of 2011 to September of 2011. A measly 5 months. I know that there is crunch and money involved when it comes to certain modern cartoons, but I saw this one post that I think was coming out of Disney's announcements outside of, I think, CinemaCon, maybe? Or maybe it was Sony's, whichever, saying that moving forward, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man and X-Men 97 will consistently have a new season every year. And I saw very vocal people, maybe the internet just serves me people that they know will annoy me, saying they're like, oh great, yeah, I love seeing seasons with cheap animation and overworked animators so anyone on the internet could just make fun of them. But like, we used to get full seasons of television every year. I'm not going to argue that Star Wars' only show in 2011 has the same budget as 2 separate Marvel shows, consistent with several other Marvel shows running concurrently, or even that the art style and the animation of Clone Wars is in any way comparable to those shows. But what are we even complaining about? This is even before I complain about Invincible later in this same script. So we're returning to an unchanged night of action every Friday. And we have been since the show started in October of 2008, except the Friday Night Action Block wasn't called that. Returning alongside a new season of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, new episodes of Generator Rex, Young Justice, and Batman the Brave and the Bold. All on September 16th, 2011. I fear at this point the Secret Saturdays may never make a comeback. Also, what happened to Symbiotic Titan? Okay, so let's try this one more time. This is the season 4 premiere, a 3-part arc kicking off with 2-episode premiere, followed up by the final part a week later on September 23rd, 2011. We are 3 years removed now from the start of the show, and the show has matured and shifted alongside the viewer. And we are still trying to make Jar Jar work. This time around, they elected to just do Avatar Way of the Water before that movie was even greenlit. But in doing so, try to set up the main story around uninteresting characters. This tent has faulty scaffolding. The conflict is an underwater civil war between the Quarren and the Mon Calamari people, which have been destabilized after the king's mysterious death, putting his young son, the prince, in charge, who is very Disney Channel prince. Like, he has the voice of a teen starlet and learns about friendship or something. And like 3 Jedi are there because it's revealed that Count Dooku has been aiding one side of the war. Even adding Kit Fisto to the story can't save it. So why would adding Jar Jar? Prince learns to be a leader, learns that hope is a superpower and can lead both peoples into peace. Meanwhile, Jar Jar manages to save Padme's life where Anakin fails. Now, I'm not here to tell tales out of school. This shit was 66 minutes! And you know what's even crazier? They continue this Gungan storyline a week later! Happy September 30th, 2011. Super Bombad Day, I think. Gungans are being mind-controlled via a magic necklace from a different Gungan who himself is being puppeteered by Count Dooku because everyone is being controlled by Count Dooku. I can expect this from the show in season 1, maybe season 2. But we have now seen episodes about how both sides of this war are being manipulated, and even seen an arc where Dooku begins to slip from his devotion to the Sith and thus the Separatists. But he's seriously just the guy in the chair who pets the cat now, only seen via hologram. Also, Jar Jar is all over this episode, and all over Padme. Have they had a Jar Jar episode where Padme isn't by his side? I honestly think they're just waiting for Anakin to leave. So the Jedi and Senators set up Jar Jar to impersonate a political official, with their reasoning being that they look indistinguishable. And sure, they look alike to you guys. Somehow the other Gungans believe this, even though he still sounds like Jar Jar, which raises the age-old question: would you rather look like Jar Jar Binks or sound like Jar Jar Binks? This is a reality for this politician. Luckily, General Grievous is actually here on planet. He's the father who stepped up. Only in Star Wars The Clone Wars can you get a meeting between 2 iconic characters like this. And Lego Star Wars, but my point still stands. I will say, though, the fight that Grievous has with the Gungan army is probably more along the lines of what they were going for in the movie the more primitive natives managing to take down a technologically advanced invader. Which would be interesting if we didn't already see that with the Ewoks, but I feel like that could be said about Star Wars a lot. Not that Star Wars keeps doing Ewoks, but that Star Wars keeps doing Star Wars. So General Grievous gets kidnapped by the Gungans because we have fun here on Clone Wars. And then the other side captures Anakin, and then they trade prisoner for prisoner, and then the episode ends. Hey, I thought Anakin wasn't supposed to meet Grievous until the movie. 2-episode arc of Season 4 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, premiering parts separately on October 7th and October 14th, 2011. Both weeks airing on the Action Friday alongside new episodes of Ben, Jen, Bat, and Young. If Thundercats wasn't a rerun, it would have rhymed. Did you mention Thundercats at all? When did that premiere? Okay, so earlier when I said that nothing happened in between the Clone Wars hiatus, Thundercats 2011 premiered. C-3PO joins a clone squad led by Commander Wolf on a distant planet to translate a conversation between the army and a tribe of glup shittos. It's just Star Wars again. I hate Star Wars! And the clones are quite awful to the droids, to the point where I assumed that it had to be an important plotline in the arc. This is not just the regular droid abuse we see on a weekly basis. But it kind of doesn't come up again, other than the clones not believing what the iconic duo got up to. In an underground adventure with R2 and C-3PO, brought into action via an Indiana Jones-esque puzzle, which makes sense considering they're very literally etched into that franchise. And everything they encounter is magic. I don't know why that surprised me, because we've seen ghosts and wizards and glowing blades of light, but something about seeing legit fairy dust, it's not bad. It just threw me for a loop. I've never seen the 80s droid cartoon, although that could be a good video in and of itself, but I imagine this is exactly what it was like. This is gonna sound hypocritical because of how little interest I have in comic relief characters like Jar Jar, but I think these two have a very specific dynamic that works best for a plot like this. Like, out of any Star Wars character, putting C-3PO in a D&D one-shot is actually a pretty fun idea. And that's really all I could say about this. Pretty fun. I love Star Wars! But then the first episode of this arc ends, and they leave the planet after a successful adventure. And now I'm confused. The second part begins with a narration implying that the 2 episodes are intrinsically linked, and we continue to follow the droids, but now they're just on a space adventure. Well, I guess technically they're always in space. I mean, by that definition, being on Earth is being in space. They crash a ship onto a different planet populated by glup shittos. We've moved from Indiana Jones to, I think this is Gulliver's Travels. C-3PO teaches the natives democracy, then they leave, they crash on another planet, and encounter a giant hologram that rules the warriors like an obscure Gmod roleplay map. Shout out Janus. And it's at this point that I realize what the episode is going for, and sort of just allow myself to enjoy it. I mean, this show hasn't been funny in, well, ever. So this is a pretty nice start to season 4, which is likely to be pretty intense, all things considered. Then they get caught up in gladiatorial combat, and General Grievous says,
General, we've come across what appears to be a pirate ship.
Use that ship for target practice.
So that line is supposed to be, use that ship, but there's no way that's what he said. We can have fun here on occasion. These 4 episodes aired across 4 distinct weeks, if you could believe it. October 28th and then November 4th, 11th, and 18th. Aired alongside the usual suspects. Actually, one of these weeks aired alongside a new episode of Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. For some reason, it wasn't a part of the action block, it just was also that day, like an hour before. It's the first proper 4-episode arc of this video, depending on how you feel about Zero the Hutt, and thus features on all of the watch guides, meant for the viewer to focus solely on the most important and top quality episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars. It's a story about Pong Krell leading a battalion of clone troopers and am I an asshole? Earnestly, am I being a dickhead? Am I a contrarian solely put here to piss off Star Wars fans? Have I accidentally Mandela effect shifted into an alternate universe where the version of Star Wars The Clone Wars that everyone talks about is entirely different? I know we're 2 seasons deep and only halfway through our projected window, but am I missing something? I am asking honestly because I feel like whenever I talk about this show, I'm taking crazy pills. Maybe I don't get it. I don't often follow up on video projects just due to requests. Writing has always come easy to me for this channel. I've been incredibly fortunate to never really experience writer's block since starting this channel. But this is the first time in a while where I'm just stumped. I've been writing all of these concurrently. I promise the nudes era thing is coming. I just wanted to do this as well. It's the only one that I dread watching every day. Not because these episodes are uniquely bad, but I just have no feeling about them whatsoever. Maybe the last crop of episodes were just uniquely bad. I know the series is called Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but that's not how I was pitched on it. 3 comments I got. 3 people asked me earnestly to come back to the series because they said they wanted to hear my thoughts and feelings on a character that we have not seen reintroduced yet properly. The show isn't bad, but for the amount of hype it gets, I remember people saying, no, the actual series is really serious and violent. People die like it's going out of style. And it's a clone with a silly nickname getting blown up off screen. This was 2011! Regular show was blowing up people with names! Like, sorry to become the antagonist of the series and the exact opposite of what they're going for, but I don't care about these clones at all. It's an interesting story that the clones that are normally partnered with Anakin, a man raised as a slave who respects them as equals, get matched with a cold-hearted general who won't even use their calling cards. On paper. But does it need to be 4 episodes? I don't think that a character acting selfishly or even seeing the error of their ways is poor writing, but Captain Rex sells out the other clones that were trying to deny their general's orders, and they get marked for execution. And it takes one of them speaking up for Captain Rex to not shoot them point blank. Why am I supposed to care about 5s? Because he has a 5 tattooed on his face? I know another show from 2011 that had a 5s character. The show is really kneecapped by the fact that every clone needs to be played by the same guy doing the same voice. I know this isn't their fault, and I really do love D. Bradley Baker. I'm sorry. I tried. I did everything in my power to make this my job for months, and watch nothing but Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but it won't stick. Not frustration directly pointed at the series. I'm disappointed in myself. I know that I'm not the greatest writer of all time, and as a medium, this is just a YouTube video, but I'm covering every episode week by week. I can't just write "I don't care" in big letters every time. Am I an asshole? Please tell me if I'm missing something. I promise I'm not saying this to be a contrarian. I'm saying this because I'm concerned. What if that's all there is? What if this whole video was a waste of everyone's time and effort? Who cares what I have to say about the Clone Wars? What if I've become a YouTube slop generator without realizing? I've passed my prime and everyone was just too nice to tell me. What if I've surrounded myself with nothing but yes men who agree with everything I say and the wider internet is laughing at me? Am I medically incapable of enjoying an action cartoon, or is all the direction stilted and boring? This is a stupid war with nameless clones just dying as much as the shadow people of Umbara. Like, sorry to both sides of this issue like Padme, but it's not even the droids anymore. The other side has soldiers dying too, and I'm supposed to care about 5s? I thought 5s was dead. I'm losing my mind. Everyone talks about this show like those millennials who say, you know, Bluey actually has some pretty adult themes. And now, when I'm saying it out loud, I sound like the people who made fun of me when I was a teenager for liking cartoons. So where am I? I watched 4 episodes of this arc. That's over an hour and a half. That is a feature-length movie. At least the actual movie had Ahsoka and a Jabba baby. Have I cornered myself into a life of nonstop slop? Have I set up a work schedule for myself that doesn't allow myself to grow or breathe? Or do I just not find guns interesting? Like what you like. Don't listen to me, but these episodes feel like they were tailor-made for people who had camo backpacks in high school and would listen to bass-boosted Russian national anthem during band practice. What am I missing? This is mandatory watching? I don't want to watch any of it. I came back to leave no stone unturned and hopefully understand the Filoniverse better, but I just have more questions now. Where's the Darksaber? When does Bo-Katan show up? Everyone wanted to know my opinion about Darth Maul. My thesis of the last Clone Wars video was that the Watch Guide is pointless because you should watch every episode. This time, the Watch Guide is pointless because I don't want to watch any of it at all. I missed the first season. At least then there wasn't an aura of self-importance in clone combat. Hell, I'd even take War Criminal Yoda slicing up people with his magic wand. Anything that isn't the animation equivalent of a side-scrolling Mario level. Each day that passes with episode after episode after episode, I begin to think, Maybe I should have started with season 5. Listen, we got to get through these episodes someday, and that day might as well be today. All of that to say, Pong Krell's a pretty fun character. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Do you hate when your favorite YouTube video is interrupted by an ad read to what is eventually going to be a huge discrimination lawsuit or just a gambling app? So do I. Subscribe to the BH Ultra at Patreon so we do not have to do that and we can keep the lights on. We've been watching cartoons from around this era of Clone Wars. That's the ad read. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm really doing a perspective. I'm doing profiles so you can see I'm trying to show it off. Just trying to be real natural about it. Sorry.
Ever had a substitute who just wasn't as cool as your regular teacher?
Stand at attention when I address you.
That's the way Rex and the clones are feeling about Jedi Master Krell.
We are the key to this invasion. Do you understand this?
But instead of getting too much math homework, they might not make it off Umbara alive.
This can't get much worse.
The 4-part special event of Star Wars The Clone Wars continues tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Cartoon Network.
Welcome to 2012, sort of. The most important year in the history of Star Wars, sort of. Marking the 35th anniversary of the original film, the 10-year anniversary of Attack of the Clones, and also the year I saw The Phantom Menace in theaters for the first time in 3D, which I only learned about because it was on the 3DS's video platform, which I think was just called Nintendo Video. Also, something about a sale, but that's not until next season. It's a technicality. These 3 episodes air on November 25th, December 2nd, 2011, and then stretch into January 6th, 2012. Whew. And it's way better. It legitimately feels like they purposefully rectified all the issues I had with the last arc. First of all, it's an episode shorter. If my biggest issue that caused the meltdown earlier was a lack of compelling characters and stilted action with no weight, then this arc is a cure to that ailment. What would you even call this arc? Slavery Arc? One of the guides calls it the Zygeria Arc, but that's just where it's set. We're peeling back to basics. This arc revolves around the main 3 of the Clone Wars crew. And also Captain Rex is there. And across 3 episodes with equal screen time, they managed to create a cohesive and compelling story without making anyone seeming wistfully naive. Like, maybe it's easy for us to say because we've seen the future, but Anakin gets away with a whole lot in this series, and everyone just turns a blind eye. He occasionally expresses out loud his intention to kill people he dislikes, and the other Jedi don't pay attention to him, and the clones are all, oh, you. But here it makes sense. They're sent to a peaceful planet to strike a deal with Ahsoka's people before Count Dooku can, but are faced with a race of slavers. Anakin, having grown up in slavery, obviously takes personal investment in their downfall. So when Anakin is thrown into a blind rage, it's more believable that Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would cut him some slack because they know his past. Captain Rex is also there. Well, Ahsoka learns about Anakin's childhood through Obi-Wan, which I don't think Anakin is ever made aware of. And eventually, after a fun speeder sequence that doesn't feel like 2 action figures shooting each other from opposite sides of the coffee table, the Jedi trio are taken as slaves themselves. Ahsoka gets placed on the back burner a little bit as the Queen of Slaves has no interest in her. She's the runt, but has a deeply unsettling interest in Anakin and Obi-Wan. Her plan with Obi-Wan is to impress Count Dooku by breaking down his spirit, placing him in a position where he can't help anyone, only a witness to their suffering, and occasionally being the cause. And she seems, I hazard to even say, romantically interested in Anakin, because there's nothing romantic about it. But it also feels a little silly to call it lust. Is this the adult Clone Wars I've been hearing so much about? We see a slave kill herself by plummeting to her death in the final act of the rebellion, and we just see her lifeless body. That's way more horrifying than a faceless clone getting shot. Captain Rex is also in this arc. Slave Queen keeps playing games with Anakin. She claims that she will let his friends go if he vows his allegiance to her forever in chains, but Anakin refuses to ever let that happen again. She attempts to convince him that even after he escaped slavery on Tatooine, that he was immediately thrust into another oppressive order where he had no agency, in the Jedi Order. And she's obviously trying to manipulate him, and he knows that, but also, she's sort of right. And he knows that too. To the point where at the end, she presents her Obi-Wan plan to Dooku, and he's like, no, I want to destroy the Jedi Order. I don't want them as slaves. And attempts to choke her to death. At the right time, Anakin arrives to fight Dooku, which Slave Queen believes means that he came back to save her. Even if he didn't intentionally, it is this fight that allows her to get to safety. Also worth noting that Anakin uses the weapon of his oppressor, a laser whip, against Count Dooku's sword. I have watched 2 seasons of the show since returning to it. Where the hell has this been? Oh, okay, so the show can be compelling and exciting at the same time. Captain Rex is also around. I even like the moment at the end where they're rescued by a battalion led by Plo Koon, and I don't even really care about Plo Koon that much. Also, Boyle's here. I fucking love Boyle. That's the only clone I care about. And his brother, Waxer. But no, let's watch Captain Rex be barely conflicted about killing his friends. He does get a cool kill in the final episode of the arc. Not to sound like an IMDb page, but I'd like to read you some of the quotes from this arc that really stood out to me. A lot of them have to do with slaves. At the end of the first episode, Yoda says, "Slavery, a great tool it is." Also, the first episode of this arc is titled Kidnapped. And then the first line in the opening of the next episode is, "Kidnapped." Oh, man, you missed it. Can I play my state-mandated droid clip now?
I still have one bomb left, Jedi.
Sir, how could you? Get it off, 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 get it off.
The first episode of this arc aired alongside new episodes of Generator Rex and the aforementioned, barely mentioned Thundercats reboot. And I want to count the new episodes of American Dad that aired an hour later, because I feel like I was accidentally mean to D. Bradley Baker, and I want everyone to know I'm a big fan of him. Whereas the next week aired alongside new episodes of Ninjago and Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. Then they took a 4-week hiatus, not even because the Friday night block took a break for the holidays. No, it still aired new episodes of other cartoons, just not the Clone Wars. They didn't even take off December 23rd. That's Christmas, Adam! Before coming back to end this arc in the first Friday of the new year. Happy 2012. Imagine waiting 5 weeks to see if Obi-Wan escapes slavery, and would then return to weekly premieres up until March. But isn't it crazy to think that 2012 marked the 35th anniversary of Star Wars, and this series started in 2008? Imagine if I made a video in like 2023, and then follow it up with a sequel 4 years later. Not that I didn't like that last arc, but it's nice to get back to a solid one-off, and by that I mean a solid two-off. Starting January 13th, 2012, an uneventful Friday, I say pretending that I don't have strong opinions about Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, because I did really like this arc, but it sort of felt like Patient Zero. Like, if the purpose of me going back to Star Wars The Clone Wars was to understand this modern era of Star Wars than we're in, I was excited about this. Ahsoka joins senators on Mandalore to potentially foster peace, but then Lux Bonteri bursts in. If you don't remember, Lux Bonteri was the kid who bonded with Ahsoka in thrilling Season 3 episode Heroes on Both Sides. They killed his mom, and then Ahsoka said, "I'm gonna kill you on the battlefield." You know, the episode that aired on the same night as Shake It, Booty, Quake It, Throw It Around. Count Dooku killed his mother, and he's obviously pretty upset by this. Lux Bonteri, not the Symbiotic Titan. He levies accusations at a hologram of Count Dooku, who just admits his crimes before they attempt to kill him. I would have hung up. I'm no Sith Lord, but that seems like a really bad way to win a war, if there are, in fact, heroes on both sides. Ahsoka rescues him, and they rekindle whatever was going on between them the last time they met. Later, when they're undercover, they do the whole cliche kiss to hide each other while in plain sight, but it's more of a I am going to kiss you to force you to shut up. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The episode is called A Friend in Need. Also, I looked up Lux Bonteri on Wikipedia because I wanted to see if this was Endgame or not, and apparently his future partner is Lux Bontari's wife. The emotional stakes of the story is that Lux wants to hire a group of untrustworthy extremists to assassinate Count Dooku. But Ahsoka thinks he's being too reckless and could get himself hurt. And I'm already on board because I like these characters' dynamic. A young boy radicalized against the entire war alongside a young idealist who sits within them. They do the whole Tarzan hand thing at the end. I mean, we know he comes back if we have to meet Lux Bontari's wife. But said extremists are Death Watch. I'm vaguely familiar with them. This is sort of what I expected to see of Mandalore, having only seen The Mandalorian before watching Clone Wars proper. There's Bo-Katan, there's the Darksaber, but these are things that really I just know that they exist. The episode doesn't tell me anything more about these objects or people, and that's fine. I'm sure we'll get more into it later on Mandalore soon. I mean, there's like 3 arcs left in the whole season. But they also introduced the Death Watch leader that I've never heard of or seen before, and his voice is provided by Jon Favreau. And after I learned that while watching an arc that I liked, my mood did shift a little bit. Like, oh, this is what did it. I'm being blinded by the modern day. I like the first season of The Mandalorian. I like this episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars. Stranger Things was good, but it feels like one of those moments in time. Like if you could travel back to one day and change one moment, everything would be different. We are now firmly in 2012. We are 9 months away from the Disney acquisition. Put a ticker tape down there. We'll flash back to this whenever need be. And I really did have so much love in my heart for that era of movies. And I think the first season of The Mandalorian is fun. And I think Andor is one of the best shows, bar none, of the last 5 years. And I liked Acolyte more than most people. But where are we now in 2026? 3 seasons deep in an upcoming Mandalorian movie, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau given the keys to the franchise as they plan near yearly theatrical releases. This is the first time in my life that I have felt burnt out from Star Wars, which is bad news for whatever I've got planned next year. And this episode is the harbinger of things to come, but I still liked it. Like R2-D2 creates a droid uprising where the droids they reprogram for target practice help the good guys escape. And this is very literally everything I could have ever wanted from a Star Wars story. Everything I've been asking for. And Dave and John gave me that. Is there a possibility that maybe this Dave Filoni era could be good? Okay, but where do they go after this? They don't come home with Ahsoka. R2 says goodbye to them. What if Death Watch comes back? This is on the same planet. What about the droid rebels? Where do they go? Another arc of 4 episodes that air weekly, leading January to February. On the 20th, alongside new episodes of Generator Rex and a new Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. Listen, I do remember liking it. Okay, forget about Star Wars for a second. Next week on the 27th, the episode President of Fart. This isn't about Star Wars anymore. February 3rd, 2012 continues the tradition with a new Generator Rex and new Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. I should specify again that it didn't air as a part of the Friday night of action block because that was technically left behind in 2011. Like, they still kept airing new episodes of their action cartoons on Friday nights. They just didn't call it anything. That's what people are missing. Anyone can put episodes back to back on TV, but without the branding, without the synergy, without the bumpers, without the logos, it doesn't have the same feeling. So I was hesitant to even say it ended properly, but it's worth noting because this series began airing on Cartoon Network with the very first installment of You Are Here, the Cartoon Network's newest action cartoon block. I don't know if you know this, but actually, the night before this premiere block, they changed all the Har Har Tharzays branding to Star Wars sounds and logos, calling it Star Star Starzays, and even aired a thumb-based Star Wars parody movie. Oh, you did know that? Oh, I bring it up quite a lot. That block's lineage, You Are Here, that action block, led from October 2008 to, well, now. And I was excited. Before even watching these episodes, I knew that this was the arc that Obi-Wan fakes his death and goes undercover. It's the one I hear the most excitement about beyond the one I've been waiting for. So that's what happens. Obi-Wan is fake shot by a fake sniper. Well, I mean, the sniper's real, but that excitement was not misplaced. Not because this arc was insightful or built up to anything about the world. It's because it was fun. And that's really what Clone Wars has been missing. It's either a dive into philosophy, which can be done well, or it's Jar Jar kitsch. The interesting thing about Obi-Wan specifically in Star Wars The Clone Wars is he doesn't really have an arc. We have characters created for the series like Ahsoka, several named clones, Lux Bonteri, and then we have characters that go through substantial change between movies like Anakin and Padme. Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith and Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones are ostensibly the same character. The only difference is he likes Anakin more now, and that could be explained by the show itself existing. Normally, because Obi-Wan doesn't really need to grow or learn or change, he often gets relegated to being the stoic guy in the background as everyone else goes through their character arc. But that's what makes his solo arcs fun. We know Obi-Wan. He's not gonna come to some profound realization or have his faith shaken. He's Obi-Wan. Like, this undercover adventure that Anakin's barely in shifts Anakin's character more so than Kenobi, and he's not the main focus. This is an elaborate plan to get Obi-Wan into a circle of dangerous bounty hunters, and it requires everyone believing he is dead. Mace Windu is in on it, Yoda is in on it, they purposefully leave Anakin out, which was Obi-Wan's idea. Maybe he does need to learn a lesson in this series. He needs to learn that his partner's a psycho. But if he does learn that, then the movie can't happen. All this does is make Anakin distrust the Order more and burrow farther in Palpatine's shadow. Speaking of, what was his plan exactly? Because Palpatine is often portrayed as this all-knowing entity that plans several steps in advance and plays both sides. Heroes on both sides. Shake it, booty, quick it, throw it. The reason that the Jedi send Obi-Wan undercover to a prison, stealing the identity of a real bounty hunter, who, by the way, they totally set up. This is a real guy who is paid by the Jedi to kill Obi-Wan, who he only finds out is still alive when Obi-Wan steals his face and voice. And what happens now that the mission's over? They let him go? They had to put him somewhere because Kenobi went to prison in his place. But they do this because they suspect there's going to be an assassination attempt on the Chancellor's life, and we later learn that that plan is being perpetrated by Dooku, who takes direct orders from Darth Sidious, who is Palpatine. So again, what was his plan? And in the final act, Obi relays the plan to Mace Windu, who reacts to the plan like, I see. So they plan on assassinating him outside. Yeah, man, where else would they do it? He's set up perfectly in the middle of the podium. That's why you're here. They're putting together a festival of life, which I choose to believe is the proto version of Life Day from the Star Wars Holiday Special. But this doesn't further Palpatine's plan in any way. I think he just does it for fun. Did he set up all this so that Cad Bane would be arrested because he's a loose cannon? Yeah, Cad Bane is in every episode of this arc. A lot of bounty hunters are. That's why I think it works so well. I was dreading another 4-part arc, but they actually treat this one like a TV show, a novel concept. Instead of being a feature-length film split into parts due to episode orders, it's one overarching story that is told across 4 unique adventures. The episode where they have to escape from a prison and encounter a young Boba Fett now being backed by Bossk. The episode where Anakin takes Ahsoka on a rage-fueled vengeance mission, which ends with him coming to blows with Obi-Wan's disguise. Then there's an episode that's just 11 different scoundrels all in a challenge cube together and have to escape puzzle sections like it's a video game. Yeah, an episode of this arc is just a team-building escape room because the survivors of said challenge cube, who they introduce individually, form the team that leads into the next episode. Except for the guy that Cad Bane shoots point blank in the head so he can get a cooler hat. That's what makes it fun to watch. Not a tragic backstory, but little idiosyncrasies like that. And you can latch onto your favorite. I really like Endo because he throws his hat. Like Mortal Kombat. Upon reading this, I couldn't remember if he survived or not, so I looked up his article on Wikipedia, and apparently he had a short stint on Jakku. Small world. But this arc is really just fun. It's fun. I never thought I'd say that about an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars. Ironically enough, because this is the second Clone Wars series, this arc sort of feels like Samurai Jack. Obi-Wan is ironically like Samurai Jack because nothing was learned or gained, but we met some fun side characters along the way. And one of the few bounty hunters who survives, it looks so much like a Gendy design with the alien eyes and misshapen head, Twazi. Count Dooku still gets away and shakes his fist. I genuinely love this. Can the whole show be like this from now on? After a week break on February 17th with no new action premieres, other than a new episode of Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, Star Wars The Clone Wars would return on February 24th and March 2nd alongside nothing. Just alone. Well, that's not entirely true. On the 24th, it aired after a rerun of the Hall of Game Awards 2012. Doesn't that sort of negate the point of it being live? And these two parts are not created equal. They both need to exist. It's a story about Ventress and takes place more or less right after the whole mess with Savage. So the first episode is a story of her coming home, being contested as a Night Sister properly and abandoning the war. But then Count Dooku sends General Grievous down to Dathomir to finish the job and kill Ventress. And what ensues is ultimately a battle between droids and witches. I've made my distaste for the ground-centric battles clear. Again, not because I think war isn't a topic that you should cover. I just think it looks aesthetically uninteresting. Turns out all you have to do is add witches that float and shoot green power and revive the dead, and it looks cool. Also, the planet of Dathomir is a much more interesting backdrop, as the deep red almost makes it look like they're submerged underwater, like in a trench. But because this is a planet made up of Etsy witches, they use a lock of Count Dooku's hair to hex him from afar. Plan then becomes forget about Ventress, Grievous needs to stop Mother Talzin before Dooku dies. I'm learning about myself that I do prefer the episodes that are starring the darker side of the war. I think it's because they often are more complex than they lead on. Because while there is a strict order on that side too, they more often than not follow their own interests. You may think that there isn't a lot of emotion you can glean from Grievous' face, that he is a meticulous, uncaring machine, but that isn't true. And you do sort of see it on his face. The direct orders are to save Count Dooku's life, but we know because of the previous Dathomir arc that Grievous doesn't like being the errand boy. So if, hypothetically, he accidentally fumbled at saving Dooku's life, where would that put him in the hierarchy? Speaking of emotion, this is the most emotive we've ever seen or heard Dooku, outside of that moment where he reacts to losing his arms like he forgot to turn the stove off. It's fun to see Grievous and Ventress fight, but I just know that Genndy would have had a field day with this. So the Night Sisters are massacred, and before, Ventress came home because she had nowhere else to go, and now there is no home anymore. The second part of the saga is a whole lot less interesting. Maybe it's due to the set of characters we're dealt, or maybe because it's just Overwatch. Very literally, a group of 5 have to stop a payload from being delivered. The prequel films get criticized a lot, as they should. A really underrepresented aspect of that is how those films make the universe feel so much smaller. Yeah, of course all the stormtroopers are the same guy. Yeah, of course Yoda met Chewbacca. Yeah, of course Darth Vader built C-3PO. Nearly 20 years take place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and during that time, Obi-Wan stays on Tatooine, except for a Disney Plus adventure where he left, met Kumail Nanjiani, and then came back. Yoda stays on Dagobah, and the droids stay on one rebel ship, where they wipe C-3PO's memory again. And there really hasn't been an aspect of the Clone Wars series. The show actually sets to rectify those issues by introducing characters and locations that make the world seem more vast. And these later episodes do introduce a cool bounty hunter with a metal whip scarf, but they also meet at the cantina. I mentioned before in the Obi-Wan Undercover arc that I thought it was kind of cute that Bosk is taking a liking to young Boba Fett. You know, it's a little reference in there, but now this is getting ridiculous. If you aren't familiar with Star Wars, there is a scene in The Empire Strikes Back where Darth Vader calls upon several bounty hunters to try and bring an end to the scoundrel Han Solo. I'd always just assumed this was like an ad in the phone book, that these are competing bounty hunters from across the galaxy. But evidently no, those are just all the bounty hunters. Bosk, Boba Fett, and Dengar were roommates for a time. What, do they carpool there? Was IG-88 in the shower taking up all the hot water in this episode? So in the end, Ventress is free and realizes she does not belong anywhere, deciding to lay low, presumably on Tatooine, because that's where everyone goes when they're at the end of their rope. By this point in writing, I haven't watched any of Season 5, but I did watch that Tales from the Underworld Disney Plus miniseries, and I liked the Cad Bane parts, but Disney Plus does this a lot now. A half measure. Instead of making a new season of a fully animated Star Wars series, they'll have 2 arcs combined into one Tales of series while also doing a live-action Ashoka TV show. I know that I've said this before. To me, Star Wars is practical effects and puppets. However, if the Acolyte and Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew were just
4-episode arcs in a new season of the Clone Wars, or whatever they call their new anthology series, something to that degree, I feel like they would have been received way better. This is what I don't understand. If the future of Star Wars is Zeb and Ezra anyway, why are we even bothering with live action? I mean, I know what the answer is. I'm not saying that these live action Disney remakes are all Jon Favreau's fault. They're all making money's fault because they all keep making money. But you are literally Disney. Disney isn't known for Predator or Alien or whatever other many franchises they own. They are known for animation. If all of the most dedicated Star Wars fanboys became fans of the Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series at first, you know they're not going to turn up their nose and say, this is a cartoon, I'm not watching this. Just make an animated Star Wars movie at that point. Even the live action Star Wars series nowadays are fully animated anyway. You think that Coliseum sequence with that ripped Jeremy Allen Hutt fighting Baby Yoda is gonna star real people? They don't even bother having Pedro Pascal in the suit anymore. He's already in the voice booth. Just draw over him. As I'm writing this, they actually are releasing episodes of a new animated Star Wars project, but arranged entirely around Darth Maul. 2 episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars, weeks apart on March 9th and March 16th, 2012, airing alongside nothing. The last bastion of Friday nights. The last of its kind. The death of Cartoon Network's nighttime action block. But Toonami would come back pretty shortly. And these episodes, this arc, is why I'm here. This isn't about The Mandalorian, not to finish what I started, not to appease 3 commenters, but because I wanted to see what everyone was talking about. Because it's common knowledge now that Darth Maul is still alive, but for most of my childhood, that wasn't the case. I saw him die in the form of a Lego and knew he was never coming back. But then, March 2012. The 35th anniversary of the franchise. The team behind a show I had already given up on watching found a way to bring him back. I wish I had known that before, because despite my change in opinion of the movies, I always thought these character designs were sick. I've grown quite maternal of the droids. Obviously, I think Grievous is one of the greatest villain designs. Even Ventress got me hooked during the 2D style. I thought Darth Maul was cool, just off of the marks on his face alone. And now, we get to see if they fuck it up. The 2-part season finale of Star Wars The Clone Wars that will finally begin to explain that weird scene in Solo. Also worth noting, if I'm gonna be stuck talking about old cartoons on this channel my entire life, I do watch new stuff. I just saw Project Hail Mary as of writing this. But no, sure, let's let Ron Howard direct a Star Wars. Famed director of Hillbilly Elegy. I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off now. Darth Maul's back, which the episode itself doesn't do. The first half of this arc builds to that moment where Maul is revealed. Perhaps Savage was lied to. Maybe he was mistaken, because the talking worm guy says there have been legends of a horned man. And before they fully reveal his face, Savage encounters a long-horned spider monster. And because we've got some distance from this, we've come to terms with it. But I imagine watching this for the first time in 2012, there had to have been a hypothetical part of the viewer that doesn't believe it. I wasn't there watching this episode live, but it has to be a fake out. Because again, we've grown accustomed to Darth Maul being alive. It's almost difficult to view this through an actual context which it was made and understand that this is an insane thing to do. Truly only a decision that can be made when you know your show is getting canceled soon. The fact that Darth Maul was actually alive all these years and has grown malnourished and lost his mind while his seething hatred of the Jedi who took his legs allowed him to use the Force to hold together spider ones. I understand this is a 2-part season finale and we obviously need to build up to that Obi-Wan fight, but I'm a little disappointed that they just witch magic to make him new legs and make him normal. Slightly more normal. I mean, honestly, most of the first episode is a planet adventure with Savage and his worm sidekick who betrays him and he kills it and burns it. It's an entirely new story, but it also very much takes place right after the last 2 episodes. Ventress returns with her new whip-wielding bounty hunter friend and sets on the bounty for Savage. Not just for the million credits, but in revenge for her fallen sisters. but the money doesn't hurt. That's really the overarching theme of this arc, whether it be 2 or 4 episodes. So much so that the Clone Wars logo at the top of the episode is colored red instead of its normal yellow. I knew this shade of logo was used in a Star Wars project before this episode and wanted to back that up because I couldn't remember exactly. And one of the first results I found was a Reddit post made 9 years ago, around the time The Last Jedi title was revealed to be red as well, speculating on what that could mean. Red equals bad, evil, etc. Maul is red, just like R2-D2 Season 5 stories had blue. Dude, spoilers. Darth Maul is Snoke confirmed? Maul back for TLJ confirmed? The point I wanted to make is that the first appearance of the red Star Wars logo came when the finale of the original trilogy was originally titled Revenge of the Jedi. And that's kind of what we see. I said before that Obi-Wan doesn't often get interesting stories in the show because there isn't a whole lot of complexity to work with. Not to say that his stories aren't entertaining. That's why the best Obi-Wan episodes are the one where they just make shit up. He's an undercover bounty hunter. He had a secret fling with the Duchess of Mandalore. And of course, what if we brought Darth Maul back? They're gonna cancel us soon anyway, which is a shame because the show now looks better than it ever has. Little details like Obi-Wan's hair falling in front of his face when he's injured. This is unheard of for those Season 1 models with molded on Lego hair. Speaking of, Dexter Jettster's Diner. You know, the hub world for the first Lego Star Wars. Unless you played the complete saga, like a coward. They have space cops, like red and blue sirens and everything, space robo-cops. No offense to them, but I was really relieved when we stopped cutting back to Ahsoka and Anakin. I don't hate them, they're the least interesting part of a story like this. Because this story is of revenge. Darth Maul wants to enact vengeance on the Jedi who took his legs and his destiny, despite living underground for years. The amount of years I never really considered. What are you doing? It never really crossed my mind how much time had actually passed. Maybe it's because I often skip The Phantom Menace, but it had to have been like 13 years for this guy. Also, how did he end up here? Where even is this planet? I'm being facetious for humorous purposes. I think that the show is at its best when it sort of, I don't want to say stops caring, because clearly bringing Maul back and having him voiced by Sam Witwer was a labor of love. That's the voice of Starkiller from Infamous. But I fear that Star Wars fans have become too rule-centric when the fun part of Star Wars is inventing new weird stuff. If there was only ever one Star Wars movie, and then someone made The Empire Strikes Back, but years later, decades later, it's exactly like Empire, fans would complain because the Force can't move things. That's not in the books. So they didn't stop caring, but they certainly didn't care about the rules. Meanwhile, Ventress wants revenge on Savage for the downfall of the Night Sisters. Savage just wants to be Darth Maul's brother. But the intrigue lies with Obi-Wan. We've seen Anakin falter with the pull to the dark side as his rage consumes him, but Obi-Wan is normally stoic and nonchalant. I know that's a real term, but I feel like it's been ruined for me due to internet speak. He's moved to rage as he attempts to overpower and kill Maul while he mocks him. He killed his former master, the man he modeled his life after, the man who left him the scraps he had to pick up, he had to clean up. Qui-Gon kind of fucked up everything for everyone. It's why the theme of that fight is Duel of the Fates. This is the worst possible thing that could have happened. But perhaps this was all a part of the plan. The legs aren't the only thing that Maul wants revenge for, or his pride, although that isn't insignificant. Darth Maul seems to already know about the Clone Wars before Savage even mentions it, as if this was always in the cards. Darth Maul was the second in command to the greatest Sith in the galaxy, who likely shared his entire grand plan with him. And I gotta say, in comparison, Maul is far more intimidating here. He is a genuine presence. Probably because his presence in the movie was like 5 minutes. But this is what I meant when I was talking about how tied they are to live action, even though it doesn't make any sense for them. That Pedro Pascal has to dub over from his California apartment. The fact that when they show Darth Maul in live action, they have to have 2 separate people playing him, one being the body and one being the voice. You know what process could rectify this? I'm saying this as if there isn't a Darth Maul animated series going on right now, but I'm done with Darth Maul. I want to see him in Clone Wars, but after that, what do you even do? Ventress ends up rescuing Obi-Wan, and it results in this really cool fight where everyone is forced to use red lightsabers, and instead of a wide arena where they could do backflips and long jumps, it's a tight claustrophobic corridor. It's suffocating. And the red lightsabers aid that feeling.
not being able to deter who is swinging at who. And I gotta say, I loved this arc. And in the end, Obi-Wan and Ventress escape as Darth Maul vows revenge and begins his long-awaited plot in the shadows. Shadow Lord. I understand that this series is an anthology that jumps around a lot, and I understand it doesn't have one concurrent story, but this is the first time I felt excited moving into a new season of this show. And all it took was a cliffhanger that didn't involve Cad Bane, because the gap between seasons was sizable. The gap between March 2012 and September 2012. Just on Cartoon Network alone, Adventure Time moves on to season 4, kicking off with the answer to the Flame Princess cliffhanger. The Amazing World of Gumball moves on to its second season, Mad onto its third. Total Drama returns to the network after its longest gap between seasons so far with a whole new cast. The Cartoon Planet revival begins airing alongside Cartoon Network's anniversary year. The Saturday morning action block begins to be taken over by DC soon enough and ends with its DC Nation, which would then see the birth of new shows like Teen Titans Go and kill the Young Justice. In retrospect, for a series that was constantly on the verge of cancellation, Clone Wars outlasted all the other shows from the original incarnation of You Are Here. Also, Secret Mountain, Fort Awesome. Please bow your heads. You don't understand how gutting this is to a guy like me. We saw the network change around this series, and now it seems to be close to happening again. For better or for worse. The Annoying Orange Show starring Toby Turner. And let me tell you, October 2012 is probably the most important month in this story. But for now, we return to September. Aptly named. Star Wars The Clone Wars returns for its 5th season on September 29th, 2012, now as a part of the Saturday morning action block. Alongside new co-workers like Ben 10 Omniverse, Pokemon Black and White, Rival Destinies, Bay Wheels. I might be out of my element here. Overall, somehow, Star Wars The Clone Wars has returned. And so do the evil Maul brothers. And Hondo, I guess. I thought initially this was going to be a proverbial passing of the torch. Hondo is a minor antagonist from the earlier seasons and is destined to be ousted as the show raises the stakes higher, because we see a lot of deaths in this episode. A lot of them. I always assumed when people talked about the Clone Wars being mature and serious, they were talking about the whole thing and not literally the last season that aired on Cartoon Network. And I like the way they do it. This episode acted as a reintroduction to the series, a revival, if you will, but also sort of a subversion. Star Wars The Clone Wars' relative bread and butter is pairing one of the 3 main Jedi with a background Jedi. A background Jedi could be basically anyone in this Coliseum fight scene. Throw a dart at the screen and I'm sure they're gonna show up in an arc. This is the whole reason Samuel L. Jackson wanted his lightsaber to be purple. So in this episode, we follow Obi-Wan teaming up with Adi Gallia. You may remember Adi Gallia from the time I used the channel budget to play with a bunch of toys. Just know that if this show had another Happy Meal run, I would be all over that. I'll be honest, I'm a little concerned about the future of that series. I genuinely don't know if I could afford doing that again for Attack of the Clones. So, having seen previous episodes of the Clone Wars, you go into this assuming it'll be a character study on this nobody. But no, Savage kills her. Dead. Subversion of the security they have built up over multiple seasons. Not only will this season be heavier, but also focus more on the Mauls. At least at the beginning and the end. I don't think they have the same last name. They definitely don't, but Savage called them brothers, so the Maul family. At first I was confused why this one episode wasn't on the multiple fan-built watch guides, but it turns out it's actually commonly watched right before the final 6 episodes. Also, apparently there's an arc they have titled called Droid Nonsense with a red X placed next to it. I'm really excited to see what happens in those. Clearly they're setting up something with the always 2 there are line, which you could tell by the voice was originally uttered by Yoda in his broken speech pattern. But because that's the way it's said in the movie, and this show lives to reference the movies, now everyone has to say it like that. It doesn't make sense for Darth Maul to say, always 2 there are. I think he's quoting Yoda. Darth Maul believes he still has right to second-in-command status under Sidious, while he's been training his lesser brother, who loses his arm in this episode, by the way. And it ends with Palpatine doing his best to keep the Jedi away from Maul, lest they find out the truth. Because despite always prepping 5 steps in advance, no one thought this dude was coming back. I knew that Darth Maul would eventually become the ruler of the underworld, but I didn't know they dove into that crime lord arc so early. They should really nail down his motivations, because oftentimes in this episode, he will bounce between almost comedically how he only cares about revenge on Kenobi, and then cold and methodical grand plans. Like, Obi-Wan is in front of him this episode, within swiping distance, and he says, dude, get out of here, I'm trying to do something. Mom told you not to come in my room. I'm excited to see where the Maul brothers end up, but more so, I'm excited to see some droid nonsense. But first, the Front Bottoms, a 4-episode arc that stretches across all of October of 2012, marking the 4-year anniversary of the show's premiere on the network. And you know what this means. Really the moment we've been waiting for. The deal for Disney to buy the rights to Star Wars and Lucasfilm from George Lucas took place and was announced mere days after the final episode of this arc. With 15 episodes left, a whole season planned, and a season already in production, the crew had to think to themselves, wait, what does that mean for our show? You know, the one they've been trying to cancel for years? All the while, the Cartoon Network is blissfully celebrating its 20th anniversary. Tons of bumpers filled with classic cartoons meeting modern ones, with the notable exception of basically most of their action cartoons. In their defense, most of those action cartoons were produced outside of Cartoon Network studios. So for Star Wars The Clone Wars, the walls were beginning to close in, and to add insult to injury, now there's writing on them. The story we've been telling, or I've been telling myself maybe, is that Disney wanted to do their own thing with Star Wars, and giving everything to Dave Filoni and making the entire universe an extended Clone Wars episode was something they resorted to after their execution didn't go as planned. But October 2012, this is the arc where they introduced Saw Gerrera, and he would be on the big screen, performed by Forrest Whitaker, in under 4 years' time. It took Darth Maul longer to be introduced to a wider audience, and he's far more iconic, but probably harder to explain. Not to say that Saw isn't, but the most iconic thing about him is that it's Forrest Whitaker. I understand that the Saw we see in Clone Wars is supposed to be much younger, but I saw this backwards, and it just doesn't feel like Saw. I know that's an insane thing to say considering this was his introduction. So Saw is a member of a group of freedom fighters. Although I'm not a fan of the clone-centric stories, I will accept that the show does have something to say about war and the rise of fascism. It just does it while also ogling a bunch of guns in a gunfight. Their goal is to liberate the city of Onderon, not to be confused with the other Star Wars planet, Alderaan, or Honduras, a real-world country. The system in charge labels them all as terrorists, which they are, from a certain point of view. I like the ironic bit of writing that it's Anakin who actually calls them rebels instead, because Star Wars happens. The whole thing is kind of built around a love triangle, and it's more of a love square, but the love I'm referring to isn't strictly romantic, so it's sort of just like a square of people that are either happy with each other or angry at each other. It's a group of people. It's like that one post that was referring to a couple as like platonic polyamory, and then somebody responded, "You mean a friend group?" Ashoka gets very deeply involved with these rebels, which the rest of the Jedi keep specifying that they cannot do. Like, the first episode is made up of the Jedi trio and Captain Rex training these rebels so that they can help the fight without technically being involved. On a technicality. I don't think that acts of aggression and terror have, like, loopholes. It's the Jedi equivalent of holding your finger up to someone's face and saying, "I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you." Also, they are involved. Like, even outside of Ahsoka being boots on the ground with them, Obi-Wan and Anakin help defend them. I'm not saying they're in the wrong, but this is almost certainly involved. Droids are already occupying this planet. Why even keep your hands out? You kill these guys all the time.
What is that? It looks like an explosive. How can you tell?
Not bad. That is only the first wave.
So Ahsoka is brought into this fight because her on-again, off-again only friend, who we saw last with the Mandalorian Death Watch, is now involved with this freedom fighting gang. It's Lux Bonteri. I don't have it written in my script because as I was watching the show, I forgot. That's the advantage you get for reading the entire script all at once. He saw what the Separatist and unchecked power did to his people and planet and mother, and he won't let it happen to others, which gives him a deep connection to Steela, another freedom fighter, and Ahsoka. I don't want to pit the only two girls on the squad against each other over a boy, especially when neither of them are Lux Bontari's wife. Because when Steela kisses him in the last episode of the arc, Ahsoka kind of smirks and gives him a knuckle to the arm like they're bros, they're dudes. But I mean, it's kind of what the episodes are implying. They do the whole pool table thing where they guide each other's hands using the gun, and then it cuts to Ahsoka, she's sneering. Ahsoka is earring. Jealousy does not look good on you, honey. And Saw Gerrera butts heads with this orphan, but it's then revealed that Saw and Steela are siblings, which is why I then changed in my notes the love square. Also, Saw and Ahsoka don't really interact, so it's more of like a relationship dome. But the city is freed in the end, not without a great cost. I wasn't necessarily surprised that they killed off Steela Gerrera, but I was surprised that they showed us her body, all splayed out Family Guy style. We know you're selling to Disney by this point. It's not like you can fire us. Despite lacking the same heaviness, this does sort of read like a proto Andor. Also featuring Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker. Like, these things these rebels are doing would show up on the news and marked as terrorist threat. And that's how you know you're touching on something real. I can't say I felt much for Steela's death. It really just built onto what it means for the others. Saw Gerrera blames himself and loses himself a little bit later on. The boy one, Lux, now he's seen his mother and love interest killed by the Separatists. And Ahsoka, who did her best to help, was left defenseless when the Jedi Order refused to deliver aid because they didn't want to get involved. Anakin and Obi-Wan do commission under the table Hondo to fly in. You guys know Hondo. He's from the show. I think this dude has been in more episodes than C-3PO. It seems more and more that the team behind this show have comfortably slotted into these 4-episode arcs, and they've gotten exceedingly good at it. Pong Krell was sort of a non-starter. And again, those 4 aired weekly across all of October 2012. And the next 4-episode arc aired across November 2012. If anything I looked up at all is correct, we have 5 or 6 arc left. The one featured after this next aired across December, and then 2 one-offs aired within January. The last 2 arcs are more or less confined to February and March of 2013. The new year. And now the show has not only hit its stride, but it's also a pretty decent rhythm for one big story a month. But as we know, it took a while to find said stride. The Adventure Time episode The Lich aired. That featured a cliffhanger of Finn the Human wishing that the Lich never existed after he killed and stole the face of the human's hero and role model, which ends the episode with a strangely domestic-looking Finn that was hinted at in a mirror episodes ago. The show then returns with a 2-episode season 5 premiere to answer the questions left by the previous cliffhanger. Star Wars! Hondo's in this arc. They love using Hondo. This arc should be titled Hondo Goes to the Circus, because that's technically what happens. But the arc actually revolves around 6 younglings, so we're already on pretty shaky ground. Star Wars, in comparison to other popular sci-fi or fantasy stories popular with children, is predominantly a story about 20-somethings, which I identify with as a 20-something, unless there's actually going to be a mandatory draft, in which case I am actually 35. I love Goof Troop, right? That's what they like. I haven't seen every piece of extended Star Wars entertainment, but I'm pretty sure this dynamic was only replicated once with the Skeleton Crew, and the only one whose name I remember is Neil, and that's because he's a Max Rebo guy, and Jude Law wants to kill him. But the Clone Wars, on the other end, has this unique ability to introduce like a band of 6 or more characters and have you invested. And that superpower is just having fun alien designs. And with Star Wars, you have a whole treasure trove already. People don't like Grievous because he's a compelling antagonist. They like him because he's a robot with 4 arms. He also pops up in this arc. He is a pawn in the Dooku and Hondo feud set up in the 1st season. But again, Hondo is just sort of there, which is a crazy thing to say about the main antagonist of this arc, because it starts out exciting. Again, I'm not an expert on every piece of the Star Wars universe, but we're in late 2012, which means that the only stuff that is actively canon right now in this little nebulous in-between are the movies and the Clone Wars. And I've seen the movies and all of Clone Wars up until this point, so outside of deleted scenes, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we see young Jedi building their lightsabers by surviving an ice cave from Banjo-Kazooie and retrieving a Kyber crystal. See, I could convincingly pull off Millennial. Banjo-Kazooie is better than Mario. See? Easy. I am unsure if this is the first time the backstory of the Jedi weapon is set up, but I definitely put my money on it. Clone Wars has made a habit out of creating load-bearing arcs for the entire universe. I mean, all of Rogue One happens because of a, I'll be honest, pretty mediocre arc about a band of rebels. I'm not a lore junkie. I like to browse Wikipedia. I don't think it's a replacement for a real story. I'm not a dungeon master. But I do like the psychological trials that the Jedi need to go through, mostly because they're often visually interesting. Like, if there's a lore reason for why Luke had to fight a version of Darth Vader in a smoky cave that had his face, or Rey has to go in a cave with a bunch of mirrors, I don't care. It looks cool and explores the character's internal struggles. So the fact that 4 of the kids get their crystals, no problem, but the human boy almost decides to leave his peer behind just to salvage the crystal, only to think the better of it, it's intriguing stuff. And on top of that, this season is giving me everything I could ever want. In the second episode of this arc, we are introduced to a droid who aids Jedi in creating their sabers, a droid who was there when Yoda was a child and went on his own journey, a droid who isn't treated second class like every other droid we meet in the series. Send tweet.
You captured this tank? Not bad for an astromech. What's your ID number? Hey, do not get smart with me. I outrank you.
And this ancient droid is played by debuting voice in this series, David Tennant. Snore, that's got nothing on the main kid, Petro. He's the one that almost got his friend killed, who's voiced by Jeff Fisher. You may know him as his stint on American Dad as the character Jeff Fisher from American Dad. He doesn't even throw his voice. It's just Jeff from American Dad. Some series I sort of meld together in my head, and I can't really explain it. It's completely accidentally. I have shown footage of American Dad in both parts of this Clone Wars series. D. Bradley Baker also plays one of the 6 kids. But this is what I mean about the designs. I'm already on board because I know these species. There's the Kit Fisto one. There's the Greedo one. The same principle applies to the Bounty Hunter arc where they're inside the cube. But Embo is leagues above all of them. It's genuinely one of my new favorite characters. I'm glad I came back to this show. I know that people meme on the Star Wars 3D or 2D fighting games because it doesn't make sense for them to just be swinging their lightsabers like it's just a bow staff. But I do think that we need a new Star Wars fighting game. Not a hero shooter. Please do not do that. There's so many side characters that I think would benefit from just being a playable video game character. One of the kids, Katuni, she becomes like the main kid. She's the last to assemble her saber. But like, Katuni? Are Padawans also allowed to change their names legally after they become a Jedi? I think you should consider it. Everyone asks me every year how I could possibly milk even more content out of the Total Drama cow. And I answer, I raise you, Skatuni. So the rest of the arc is that Hondo kidnaps Ahsoka and the kids have to band together to host a fake circus and rescue her from the clutches of Hondo, who famously loves the circus. Not to revive discourse that started with Andor Season 2, which is a much better show, I've never been one to shy away from the uglier parts of life. I've never been on board with the outright censorship, and I think that sometimes art is meant to make you feel uncomfortable. That's how you know it's impactful. I know this is coming out in May, but go see the drama before TikTok gets a hold of it and says it's problematic. No one's gonna click on a video of me reviewing movies I just saw in the theater, so I gotta sneak it into Clone Wars. I liked Hoppers too. The Mario Galaxy movie was fine. It was like the same quality as the previous Mario movie. I don't know why everyone's freaking out. I don't know why people thought it was gonna be really good. And I made a joke earlier about clone drones stating left and right that the show is actually very adult, and at the time I didn't buy it. But Hondo intends to sell Ahsoka to the highest bidder and says that they'll pay extra for a Jedi. A female Jedi. I don't want to hear that. This episode aired on the Cartoon Network at 9 a.m., an hour after an episode of Pokemon where they rescue a crying teddy bear made of ice. Just to put it into perspective. Now I'm starting to understand why this show also aired on the Adult Swim's revival of Toonami. Speaking of perspective, it is now December of 2012. The world is passing you by, and soon enough, even this video will be a distant memory for me. I barely remember the name of Ahsoka's friend. Oh, fuck, wait. So it's a week later, which means that Ahsoka and her friend enter the Weenie Hut Junior Cup for— That's not right. I was lied to.
That's what I get for bothering to check in with those watch guides. It's actually a full 4-episode arc that spans across December and January into the new year. And it's not even that bad. Certainly not enough to stave off entirely. But I am biased. I mean, it's the same principle for the alien kids and the bounty hunters. It's a character you're just introduced to. It's held up entirely by its design. From a macro level, that is the character. And I was gonna make a remark about how this fun side adventure isn't as bad as the Jar Jar ones, but on paper that appears not to be true. It just happens to star several droids instead of a rabbit fish guy who speaks in reverse riddles. But I don't think it's above his stories because Jar Jar as a character doesn't have much to say about the Gungans, his people. His stories are staked in personal benefit or the benefit of his friends. Droids, like these astromech droids, in comparison, definitely are built to follow orders. They're sent on this mission in a crunch because the risk of lives lost is too high. I mean, one of the astromechs gets killed pretty early on into this arc with relatively no fanfare. You could argue that the brash and chaotic pit droid who joins the ranks seemingly on a fluke fits that more comedic role, and that is true, but it doesn't dip into the realm of annoying, even though this is a feature-length story. Nor is the tiny commander that leads them played for laughs. Aside from that first laugh, but it's not like you're laughing at him, it's more like a shock, like, oh, oh. Sometimes you laugh more out of shock than actual humor, and sometimes you gotta lock in and hold your breath when someone tells you a really sad story, because sad stories often start out and set up a sad punchline. The butting of heads between this pit droid and the tiny commander drives the story early on. It sort of has to. They're the only characters who can talk. It's good to see R2-D2, and also R2-KT. I thought I was calling back to her existence in a previous episode, but I'm actually calling back to KT appearing in The Force Awakens, and thus the Force Awakens video. It's all Star Wars to me, baby. It's all Star Wars, even the bad stuff. The books, however, are not Star Wars. And the droids are sent on this mission to probably die. Anakin is the only one who reacts with anguish and anger, because R2's his fucking boy. Wow, having only seen this episode and this episode alone of Star Wars The Clone Wars, this Anakin guy is a really good egg. I won't be watching any more Star Wars. Eventually, both the commander and the only droid that speaks have to simultaneously overcome their hardwired programming and intensive training. And I thought this was going to be carried over into the next episode, where the team of droids find a man who looks and sounds exactly like a clone trooper, but had no knowledge of the conflict or the regime. I can sort of understand why all of the watch guides separate the first 2 episodes from the next 2, because while they all tell the complete story of the astromech crew, they have separate arcs, because you might think that the first 2 episodes have something to say about what it means to be a droid on the side of the Republic. I mean, there's seriously a scene where the battle droids don't register them as intelligent beings or threats because they are droids. But that clone trooper thing is self-contained to 1 episode in this arc, and his character arc ends with him standing up to the man who kept him sheltered and paid him nothing, saying that he won't be treated like a slave anymore. He's gonna join the clone army to probably be treated the same. The show has a lot to say about social dynamics and conflicts, and occasionally political ones, but never has anything to say about the war, the Clone War, the Star War. Like, we have episodes about heroes on both sides. Shake it, booty, quick it, throw it around. But it's never about the people that are fighting. It's about the politicians who feel bad about it. This isn't even me being the friend that's too woke. This is what the story is supposed to be, no? 2 sides pit against each other by a secret old fascist to keep people scared and subordinate. 2 sides literally mass-produced by the same man by proxy. I'm not even a fan of the prequels, but that's what they're about. I live my life by the decree that there are no incorrect interpretations. So maybe you're right. Maybe Star Wars is about how cool the Jedi are and how epic Vietnam was. How would I know? I wasn't there, but I am 35. Oh. So this is Star Wars The Clone Wars. 3 episodes spanning weekly from January 19th, 26th, and February 2nd, 2013. I feel like it keeps coming up every video. Every year I try and break out of this nostalgic lens because I don't want to be one of those people online who just talks about cartoons from their childhood, because I am watching modern cartoons and I do really love them, and I'd like to think that I am aiding in the support of those shows despite them all being canceled immediately
But I have come to terms with the fact that these videos I make, at least on this channel, if it can't be as modern, are sort of a retelling of my life, personal stories through these pieces of art, these pieces of entertainment. And I'm trying to think if I have anything to say about early 2013, and genuinely I'm coming up on nothing. I do earnestly think that I just wasn't keeping up with TV anymore. I dropped most of my favorite cartoons. I stopped watching wrestling. I was rocking with a Wii U, but the Xbox One was still a little bit out. No Total Drama, no Pokemon, no Smash. I'll be honest, guys, I'm in a little bit of a dead zone here. And the worst part is, insultingly, I was pretty convinced I was done with Cartoon Network at this time before coming back to get really into Steven Universe. But Incredible Crew premiered the same month, and I definitely remember that. Meaning that I had dropped Gumball and Adventure Time and Regular Show, but I still kept up regularly with The Incredible Crew. Sometimes I really just do be running errands with my mom, though. So there's this idea, this concept of the perfect introductory episode. And it's really a myth. Some would say that's the pilot episode, the perfect first outing like The Boys or Severance that swings for the fences immediately. But sometimes you get a comedy like The Office or Seinfeld, or hell, I'll throw in Royal Crackers in there because I seem to be the only one who likes it, where you can technically watch any episode in any order, and the first season is often not even recommended. That isn't the case with Royal Crackers. That one's actually good the whole time. Most TV shows would just air on TV before the empire of streaming, and you could jump in whenever. And that's a little bit of a lost art. And while I do mourn the loss of syndicated television, I do not mourn the loss of discussion around the perfect introductory episode, because nobody ever has any nuance. Get your friends and family into watching Doctor Who by showing them the best episode of the series and also the episode that the Doctor is barely in. That'll get them into watching more. Does anyone have any recommendations on what matches to get my friends into wrestling? Yeah, you should start with this 60-minute Iron Man match that goes to a time limit draw. You can't just start with the best one, because then everything after that is worse. Star Wars The Clone Wars, by nature of being made up of several multiple episode arcs, is a middle point. You can jump into any arc you want, but you should watch the arc in episode order. Years ago, I argued against the watch guide, not because I think the watch guide is a bad idea, you know, watch what you like. I'm learning as I go through every episode and every arc of the series that they're not all created equal. It isn't a great show, but it has great moments. It was more that I was completely opposed to the idea that engaging with art is a waste of time. That we need recap, that we need a retelling of One Piece so that it's shorter. If you like the show, then watch the show. I know that people are often fighting for free time, but whenever people ask me if there's a movie, and I absolutely hated it, would you recommend me seeing this? My answer is always yes, because I like seeing movies, and I think you should form your own opinion. I'm not here to tell you what to think about Star Wars. I write these for fun, and I make them for nobody. Are you a member of the 5K army? The 5K people that watch all my videos? And no more. 99% of the time, the idea of one perfect episode or arc to show someone to get them into a show or series simply does not exist. But this arc is that for Star Wars The Clone Wars. This whole video was because people told me that I should get to the Darth Maul parts. I could have just watched these three and had a much higher opinion of this show walking out of it. Unfortunately, this arc kicks fucking ass. The nerds were right. Definitely weren't right when they called me and the droids clankers, though. Because everything is so tight. I was already on board with Darth Maul and Savage Opress, but I didn't understand why they wanted a crime empire. But now I get it. Now I understand why they hold that motivation. It is solely to make the worst possible situation for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Thank God they reintroduced Mandalore in a later but slightly earlier arc, because there are bits in this arc where Satine clashes with, I think, the villain of Mandalore's first arc, but I cannot remember, because if I didn't bring it up in that first video, then it isn't canon. He's an old guy. He seems untrustworthy. The sheer fact alone that they were able to fit so many characters and dynamics into 3 episodes is both an incredible achievement and also a striking disposition of the rest of the series. If we could tell the best story of the series in 3 episodes, why are we giving R2 4? Why am I supposed to care about Pong Krell? And when I say giving R2-4, I'm referring to R2-D2. I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure there's a droid somewhere named R2-4. So Darth Maul and Savage Opress, wounded and on death's door from their last battle, are discovered by Death Watch. You know, Death Watch. Bo-Katan, Jon Favreau, all the other ones with bad haircuts. I'm getting ahead of myself, but the whole first episode of this arc are the two groups working together to recruit several bounty hunters and spice traders to make their own crime army. Also, Mortal Kombat characters on Lethal Lava Land. They chuck a lightsaber and cleave the leader's head clean off. For whatever reason, I know I mentioned this before, Disney Plus does not have a subtitle option on my TV. So when it comes to Star Wars names, I sort of have to wing pronunciation or spelling. Ask Skatuni. They call this Mustafar group Black Sun, but I don't know if that's Black Sun as in S-U-N or S-O-N. Darth Maul keeps talking about wanting to visit his Black Sun. I guess he's a good dad. I don't know why he keeps specifying his race. Which raises an even more important question. Is Darth Maul black with red stripes or red with black stripes? We do not know how long the Maul brothers have been floating in space. We do not know how long it took them to gather the troops for their army. And Obi-Wan is roped into this alone because the Duchess Satine, who he had a fling with in his past, calls upon his help. But because Mandalore is a perfect pacifist utopia, aside from those murders that one time, the Jedi have no jurisdiction there. They're constantly caught up in bureaucratic nonsense because the planet remains neutral in this Star Wars. So it's not specified how much time has passed between the Maul brothers' last loss to Obi-Wan, as the show jumps around a lot, but I like to think this takes place like a week after. Obi-Wan gotta put his gear on and sigh because he's gotta deal with the same guy again. So Jon Favreau and Darth Maul dab each other up Predator style. The movie Predator. I'm not making an accusation on Jon Favreau. At first, Favreau doesn't believe that Darth Maul actually is a Sith Lord because there's only allowed to be two. Only two there are. Always two there are. Does everyone in the universe know about this rule? How did he hear Yoda say? Is Yoda quoting someone else? Is it doctrine? Is it written in the stars a million miles away? Through this partnership as audience members, we do actually grow to understand why Death Watch wants to reclaim Mandalore. They used to be a warrior race that only honored combat, and the Duchess has made them all pacifists. The Death Watch's adage is go woke or go broke. So nice of the show to actually include fans like Star Wars Theory into their program. In theory, they both get what they want. Jon Favreau wants to take back Mandalore, and Darth Maul wants revenge on Kenobi. As does Savage, who now gets new metal arms after Kenobi stole his real ones. I like that it's become a universal Star Wars story for characters to waste time going to Jabba's palace for no reason. Not once has Jabba's palace moved a story forward, but I've also never disliked a Jabba's palace scene. And we get to see Embo and Whip Girl. I might genuinely love this show now. They even have their own Scooby-Doo for the team. I don't know if this was a mistake or just a weird cut or maybe even intentional, because the dog creature makes animal noises, and then while fighting it off, Savage seems to roar like a lion. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about Darth Maul's puke green brother. Maybe they established he could do this, but in actuality, it's an elaborate piece of foreshadowing towards Jon Favreau's live-action Lion King movie from 2019. He's just the director. It's not his fault. Doesn't mean I can't blame him for it. There's a little bit of animosity between the two families. Jon Favreau keeps insulting Maul's new crime army, spitting out a really sharp TH, calling them thugs. You are literally in a death gang. Those in glass houses. And their plan goes perfect. They use the TH thugs to cause chaos across Mandalore, and then have Death Watch swoop in and stage heroic moments. In a war of trade disputes, it's always gonna come down to PR. Death Watch is ushered into the room where it happens, while the Duchess Satine is out behind bars. This is where she calls Obi-Wan for help. But Jon Favreau double crosses the Maul brothers, who pick a more suitable face for their regime in the old guy whose name escapes me. Darth Maul challenges Jon Favreau to combat of warriors over the rule of Mandalore, and the fight is really cool. When the relationships between characters and emotional stakes are set up, this show can fucking cook. And in a piece of perfect dramatic irony, or perhaps even a very deep metaphor, Darth Maul kills Jon Favreau. I couldn't write a joke better than that. But I'll try. This franchise can tell a compelling story when they got a real chef in the kitchen.
because he also directed Zathura. I legitimately did not know that until I looked up his filmography for this joke. And after all these years, I now finally understand why Darth Maul is the king of the crime lords. He got his feelings hurt and Jon Favreau betrayed him. And he isn't even the last to die. I hate to rush through the final episode of this arc because it is legitimately great, but we see even more of Obi-Wan going undercover. In retrospect, I think that I had a point in that first video that you should watch every episode of the Clone Wars, but at the tail end of the series, you could just watch the Maul stuff. After Satine drops a line about contacting her sister, Darth Maul blows up their ship, greets Kenobi, chokes Satine in front of him in an attempt to make him embrace the dark side, and then he kills her in front of Obi-Wan. They share one final moment together, Obi-Wan previously saying that he would have left the Jedi Order for her had she just said the word, and here she reveals that she always loved him and always will. It's hard to follow up after that. And still, the review must go on. That's for me and like a dozen people that'll get that, but those are my most dedicated dozen. I know it's kind of corny, but I feel like enough time has elapsed that we can sort of start calling YouTube audiences an army again. Are you ready to enlist in the 5K army? They do not intend to kill Kenobi. Instead, they want him to suffer in prison like Maul did, torturing him with his own anguish and misery. Obviously, he gets away in the end, finding out that Bo-Katan, who defects from Death Watch after Jon Favreau's death, is actually the Duchess Satine's sister. And this is a big reveal because I genuinely didn't know that. And I've watched the second season of The Mandalorian. Does she not talk about it? If my sister was killed by a devil man, it's all I would ever talk about. One of the few times I can't even blame or discredit Maul for not killing him when he had the chance, because to his core, Darth Maul is a petty bitch. In the end, draped in robes, Darth Sidious arrives on Mandalore and effortlessly throws soldiers around the city. He comes face to face with the Maul brothers, Darth Maul kneeling to his former master, who does not greet him with the same warmth. He already has a new apprentice. And apparently the entire world revolves around the rule that there can only be two. Darth Sidious unsheathes, or unsheaves. Again, congrats the dozen people that get it. Two lightsabers as the brothers fight while Darth Maul dual wields his double-sided lightsaber and his newly won darksaber. I used to be really proud of nerd culture, and in the 2010s it's a lot of fun, and I will unabashedly talk about all the things that interest me, but it seems more and more now, specifically online, that people who parade around nerd culture are like anti-artist, and for whatever reason, like pro-company, pro-merger. For whatever reason, I think maybe because people are a little insecure about a specific level, a quantifiable level that you need to be smart to understand movies, which isn't true at all. The idea that like someone liking an Oscar-nominated film more than like Endgame somehow insults your intelligence, and they're faking it because this stuff is actually boring. Oh, they make movies for people who watch movies in black and white and sip their wine. And that is fucking annoying, but I still like all of these things. I like Marvel movies. I like superhero movies. I like Doctor Who. I fucking like Star Wars, man. But, you know, watch the drama. I hate to sound like I'm playing with toys right now, but it's fucking cool. Darth Sidious murders Savage Opress as Darth Maul begs for mercy. The only reason Sidious doesn't kill him is because he sees another use. I'm creating a straw man of myself, so let me burn it down for a second. The playing with toys analogy only really works for characters slammed together with no story or stakes. There's no way that Mandalorian movie can be good, right? Like, I don't want to expect it to be bad. But this scene, despite being a preteen dream, I'm 35 by the way, is not that. Because despite being a preteen dream, this isn't that. It's a story about revenge and a power struggle. Darth Maul, after scratching and clawing to survive, to inject himself back into this story by sheer force of will and believing that he has a place in it, is then cut down to size by the literal embodiment of the plot of Star Wars. The prequel trilogy is Darth Sidious's master plan. He knows how it plays out, how it was always destined to play out. He didn't win because he was smarter, he won because this is a story from a long time ago. Deadpool having to sit down with a meeting with Jon Favreau isn't meta.
It's just annoying. This is meta. This is the story acting as its own force of will. Jon Favreau's really taking a beat in this arc. Is there no honor for the deceased? And the arc just ends there. However, it does create the setup for the very final arc of the 5th season of Star Wars The Clone Wars. This arc ends on a cliffhanger involving Darth Sidious and Darth Maul, and still 4 episodes remain. Stretching from February 9th, 2013 to March 2nd, 2013, a dark age for Andrew Ultra, not due to quality, but the barrenness of attachment. 4.5 years after the show's premiere on Cartoon Network, following a very strange thumb parody movie, and 3 years after we first discussed it. The first video, the original video, ended with the beginning of a new era, a renaissance for the Cartoon Network. But these eras are defined not by historic times retroactively, but rather branding in time. And this Check It era would continue for several years after the end of Star Wars The Clone Wars stint on the network. 2013 actually marking the exact middle point. But 2013 would also mark the first flashes of perhaps a more pastel era. Within the year, all of the live-action shows carried over from the previous era would be out the door. Unless you count The Annoying Orange as live action, it has a guy in it. Incredible Crew lasted about 4 months. And what a life it lived. Within the year, Problem Solvers canceled. Generator Rex canceled. Ben 10 would change up its art style yet again as the anime of the late 2000s was sort of falling out of favor, at least with the network, and Batman the Brave and the Bold was long dead by this point. I started watching the show partially because I'm a fan of Star Wars and wanted to understand it better, but also as a reflection of that Friday night action block, You Are Here. Its spirit moves on when Clone Wars ends. It's the only thing it's still tied to. Every other show it aired alongside is gone. Heavy hitters like The Amazing World of Gumball, Adventure Time, and Regular Show were still on the airplane firing on all cylinders, into the sky. For certain shows, firing off into space. But within that same space, 2013, after the end of Star Wars The Clone Wars, the network would see the debut of 3 new shows: Uncle Grandpa, Steven Universe, and Teen Titans Go. We talk a lot about the concept of the big 3, and it's really a reductive way of looking at things, because for this network at this time, it really was these main 6 shows. Kind of fucked up that moving into the next year, 2027, only one of these doesn't have a modern equivalent, but I'd be lying if I said I thought we needed an Uncle Grandpa comeback. I do think we can take another crack at Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, though. But before we can even begin to unpack that, remember Ashoka? The young character introduced in this series for this series that debuted for the theatrical movie that was really just a bunch of episodes pasted together. That Ashoka. I know that this show has gone far off the rails by this point. We live in a world where Ventress is palling around with bounty hunters, and Darth Maul is the sole heir to Mandalore. And not to be rude, but I've seen the movie Revenge of the Sith. Ashoka isn't in it, unless they're gonna special edition her back in it. Because I'll be honest, there are actually very few arcs or episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars that retroactively make the movies better. I suppose if you're one of the lucky few to have watched the saga for the first time in chronological order, it adds a layer of nuance to the one continuous story that wasn't originally there. Maybe it's because I didn't grow up with this show, maybe it's because it was clearly written after the fact, and maybe it's because it's an entirely different style and format. But it just never felt like this was one continuous and connected story. It always felt like Star Wars The Clone Wars was a spin-off cartoon that was never meant to go anywhere. Because Ashoka is the main character. You can go on and on about the story of Maul or any of the other nicknamed clones or the plight of Mandalore, but No, Ahsoka was created for this show to be the kid's insert character. And more often than not, the show is driven by her experience. I'm not trying to be a movie purist who refuses to acknowledge the canonicity of the show because I hate it for some reason, because I don't even. I like the show. But when I watch Revenge of the Sith, which I very seldom do, I don't spend the runtime thinking, I can't believe this guy was just going on adventures with his apprentice. Because this Anakin and this Anakin are fundamentally different characters. The existence of one does not retroactively rewrite the other. And if we're getting into plot hole territory, which I don't really like doing unless it's just for comedic effect, I don't think they're actually apt criticisms or comparisons for a show, why would the Jedi Council allow this guy to have a Padawan? They all think he's a psycho, and none of them want him to be Jedi Master. But that disassembles the whole conceit of the show. And it doesn't really matter. They let him have an apprentice because he needs to have one. Without Ahsoka, the show doesn't work. These animated characters do not change anything about that trilogy of movies released across the 2000s. This is a story from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is already over. Nothing can be done to change it. But the characters in Star Wars The Clone Wars are destined down the same path. While the presence of Ahsoka and other characters do change the story incrementally, it doesn't change the outcome. Anakin Skywalker still falls to the dark side. He still has a son that is raised on Tatooine. The Empire still rises and then falls. However, with all of that being said, while the existence of this show does not change the outcome or perspective of the live-action films, we still know the story will end up the same, so this story can help us understand a little better. I don't have it written into my script, but my camera footage corrupted, so I'm refilming this basically at the very end of working on this video, ostensibly a week before it comes out. They announced today that the plans they had for an Ahsoka Season 2 and an Ahsoka and Mandalorian crossover have all been shelved or delayed. I think we're probably done with all this Star Wars stuff, right? Like, we can move on. Because this arc, these episodes are genuinely beautiful. Realistically, it's the perfect send-off to a series if they didn't already leave a bunch of loose ends open because they thought they were going to get another season. A 4-episode arc primarily focused on Ahsoka being framed for a crime she did not commit by an institution that betrayed her trust. All the while, we see her mingle with other animation-exclusive characters that have, whether they wanted to or not, really guided her journey. Sindralig also makes an appearance. You know, Sindralig. A boss fight and playable character from the hit video game Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, the video game for the original Xbox 2005. He's close to the bottom of the competitive tier list. He has to be there. The Jedi Temple has been suicide bombed by an unknowing participant who has injected themselves with microdroids, or rather been injected with microdroids, fulfilling his story that was cut from the 2005 film. Like, if you look him up on Wikipedia, he has a real human actor. They cast a guy and everything. So Ahsoka is set up as the perpetrator of this terror attack by a Force-sensitive mastermind that we do not see, able to cloud the judgment of even the most powerful Jedi involved. This story is instrumental towards Anakin's fall to the dark side. In the end, when Ahsoka finally clears her name, the Jedi Council that once excommunicated her invites her back, and she refuses. It's one of the most beautiful landscape shots in the entire show. Anakin Skywalker watches his last piece of humanity almost literally walk off into the sunset when he chases after her and begs her to stay, revealing that he too dreamed of leaving the Jedi Order. Ahsoka responds simply with, "I know." Star Wars! Maybe it's just a really good arc of television, or maybe, just maybe, I've always been a fan of Ahsoka. Because people will jump around to watch their favorite arc starring a gaggle of clones or just their favorite Darth Maul. But if you actually grit your teeth and sit through some of the worst episodes of really any cartoon, like I did, it's about Ahsoka. It's Ahsoka's journey. Except for those Jar Jar ones. I guess she's like there? Yes, because even episodes that don't explicitly involve her eventually come around to this arc. When Ahsoka escapes clone prison with the help of Anakin. There's actually this really great moment where Ahsoka is conflicted about going back with Anakin before she jumps out of a sewer pipe, like that one movie where Harrison Ford didn't kill his wife. Star Wars! Where Anakin extends a hand telling her that she can trust him. All the while we can faintly hear the clones in the background calling for him as General Skywalker. More subtle than anything else in this show. So escaped, disgraced, Ahsoka has a run-in with the newly anointed bounty hunter Ventress, Asajj Ventress, who intends to turn her in for her fiscal reward. After a long chase through the seedy underbelly of Coruscant, mirroring the last time Ahsoka was here when she lost her lightsaber seasons ago. Harkening back to the rivalry between the two, Ventress agrees to work alongside Ahsoka as long as she gets her back as well. Because Ahsoka knows that Count Dooku has double-crossed and abandoned Ventress, and now Ahsoka believes she has suffered the same fate. Ahsoka has grown a lot in these 5 seasons. In the opening scene of this entire arc, under threat of death, Ahsoka very seriously refers to R2-D2 by his government name, as opposed to the more cute nickname she always used to give him, R2-E. I've heard on and on that Ahsoka started out as a generic Mary Sue character who eventually developed into this stoic badass who fights for herself, and that's when the public opinion changed, but again, I always liked Ahsoka. I mean, I would certainly take season 1 Ahsoka over Ahsoka any day. And I mean her personality, not her character design. Have you guys seen that one figure they're trying to sell? Where it's baby Ahsoka, but she's wearing the season 1. It just, you should be put on a list if you buy this figure. It's surprising to me that the 6th season was already in development by this point, because this arc acts, again, as a more fitting finale than the actual last season. There is no real cliffhanger here. It is just Ahsoka, having lost all faith in the Jedi Order, abandoning the Jedi to find her own answers. This arc begins with Anakin piloting his Revenge of the Sith ship while being attacked and bombarded by buzz droids. See, it's like poetry. It rhymes. Also, how did they get that ship back for the movie? Because that shit disappeared into the fog. Get the Grievous clip where he says, "Bring me that shit." A lot of my journey back to this series has been gaining additional context for these stories I had been told from second hand. I could finally see the Obi-Wan Mandalore arc I've heard about in passing. I could finally see why Darth Maul comes back after his weird-ass cameo in Solo. Because of that, there were relatively few twists in this series that I didn't expect, that I didn't know were going to happen. I didn't think that Satine died in Clone Wars, but I knew that she wasn't alive in the future. There is the exception of one twist that I am really glad nobody spoiled for me. I know that we are hours into this video now, and this is basically the very end of it, and we've been going over seasons of episodes of years of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, where I've just been systematically explaining all the plot lines of all the episodes, but spoiler warning, the Jedi who actually planted the bomb, the micro droids, and framed Ahsoka was Barriss, Ahsoka's closest friend and confidant, who we haven't seen in several seasons, and thus I haven't seen since that first video years ago. And this genuinely shocked me to my core. Because out of all of the episodes and arcs I cast away because I didn't find them interesting or compelling, I really liked these two together. That time they had to fight a bunch of zombies together while stuck on a ship and balancing out their rivaling ideals. I guess Ahsoka has a new best friend in Lux Bonteri. Jury is still out on his wife. Now the script has been flipped and Barriss has been radicalized. She is no longer the stone-faced, rule-abiding Padawan. She has seen the light, ironically through Ahsoka. The Jedi Order has fallen from grace. They are no longer keepers of the peace. They are warmongers who are to blame for this conflict. Seeds of dissent. It has a lot to say about our world as much as theirs. There's actually anti-war protesters early on in the first arc, but I didn't want to mention them because they use holographic protest signs. I know it's the future, but surely we still have, like, paper. I can excuse a lot in Star Wars. I can excuse a 50s space diner, but that's just ridiculous. Barriss is dragged away screaming to the court that it's only a matter of time. Because everyone can enjoy Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but using Ahsoka as the in character, it's a series for children. It's a series for girls. Which is good, by the way. That has been a demographic sorely lacking representation when it comes to Star Wars. Not the only representation certainly lacking in Star Wars, but I love the way that the arc utilizes the girls. It really is about the trio of Ahsoka, Barriss, and Ventress. Because by the end, both Barriss and Ventress change from Ahsoka's point of view. I love that because Barriss attempted to frame Ventress by using her gear, when Anakin comes to arrest her, Barriss already has her red lightsaber. She has a narrative reason to be using red lightsabers in this fight beyond just being evil now. Because she isn't a Sith or a Separatist or a general. But the only language that the Jedi understand now is violence. Ahsoka doesn't leave the Jedi Order because she felt personally scorned by their excommunication. It's because, for the first time, she believes fully, heartedly, that the Jedi could be wrong. Barriss didn't just change overnight, neither did Ventress. This war, this conflict warped them till they became someone entirely different. And in a story about senseless bloodshed, a sided war manipulated by a powerful elite, a degradation of promises made in the past, stepping on the throat of peace, how am I meant to care about a bunch of clones shooting guns because they have nicknames? I came back to Star Wars The Clone Wars for 2 reasons. 3, if you want to count personal investment. Point number 1, to see if I could force myself to understand the world that I used to find enrapturing. Ahead of seeing the first Star Wars theatrical film since 2019, the year this chamber was built. And 2, to see what the hell everyone was talking about with Darth Maul. And while filming this, while writing this, while editing this, an entire animated show dedicated just to Darth Maul dropped, and I don't think I'd like Star Wars anymore. Maybe that's too harsh. Maybe that's an oversimplification. Maybe that is a sweeping generalization. But due to the commodification of a series that is now entirely represented through streaming series, I just don't care. But you may be asking, all 3 of you, that if I truly wanted to understand this new Filoniverse and his Mandalorian, why stop here? Also, why didn't you just watch Star Wars Rebels? It would have made more sense. You should have just watched Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 5 was not the final season of the series, nor was it the final season to air in the 2010s, but it was the final season to air on the Cartoon Network. We have since mythologized the Disney buyout, this greedy, monopoly-centric company here to gobble it up just for streaming numbers that would eventually bar diminishing returns where all the movies look like State Farm commercials. But at the time, in 2012, I was just stoked that Star Wars was getting a proper theatrical release again. Because at the time, the way George Lucas described it, he didn't see it as selling to Disney. He saw it as selling to his longtime friend and collaborator, Kathleen Kennedy. He would then go on to call them all white slavers. I don't agree with his directing, but goddamn if I don't support the shit that comes out of his mouth. The real reason I even started watching the show, the reason I had this amorphous idea of what it was bouncing around in my head from memory to membrane, was really because of Thumb Wars. So if you don't know, one night, October 2nd, 2008. I know I bring it up every year. It's Stars Days. But realistically, I'll have more to say about that this year. Star Wars The Clone Wars, for me, is not a retelling of the movies, is not an extension of the lore, is not a jumping off point for anyone interested. Star Wars The Clone Wars was a show that Cartoon Network commissioned to hold up their new Friday night action block. A block that, as of March 2013, no longer exists. No longer would Cartoon Network separate shows into categories of comedy or action. Soon enough, every show would be a sci-fi world with an overarching plot and the arc stretched out over multiple episodes, while still holding on to those Western cartoon comedy archetypes. Star Wars The Clone Wars was a couple years too early. It probably would have killed in the bomb format. The fact of the matter is the 6th season was already in production with Cartoon Network. It was already halfway complete when they got the news about the well, the white slavers. Over the span of a year, very rabid fans would scrape up every detail they could about this canceled and unaired and unfinished season. Multiple episodes of which would leak out with fully finished dialogue, but unfinished animation. Which, man, makes the show so much more entertaining.
I'm done with this. Oops!
Maybe it just reminds me of the cutscenes from that 2005 Star Wars game. It's a shame we couldn't have any arcs dedicated to Syndralik's Padawan Sarah Kato. Because the Cartoon Network no longer had the rights to air Star Wars The Clone Wars, with the Disney purchase, most future animated Star Wars projects would air exclusively on Disney's boy channel, Disney XD. Those are their words, not mine. You heard it from them. Star versus the Forces of Evil? That's a boy show. If they ever do a Mad parody, like they bring Mad back, here's a pitch. Star Wars versus the Force Awakens of Evil Empire. The 6th season began production as another 22-episode season, but once production shut down, the only episodes left were the ones that they had already begun production. In a state of limbo and now owned by a company probably fed up with angry fan letters, the 6th season we got would be dubbed the Lost Missions and would drop as a 13-episode mini-season on Netflix, all dropping the same day, March 7th, 2014. These Lost Missions released about 6 months before the Disney XD premiere of their newest animated Star Wars project, Star Wars Rebels. Disney wasn't really interested in this prequel era they were building with this show and other video games they canceled, as is very evident by the 2010s with their sequel trilogy, the spin-off movies, their video games, their TV shows. They were more interested in the nostalgic 80s era of the original trilogy, as 80s nostalgia was very big at the time. It was 2015 to whenever Stranger Things ended. So I guess now. 80s nostalgia was the thing that every major company was chasing, technically following in the footsteps of the blockbuster hit Jurassic World. I know that the original Jurassic Park came out in the 90s, but I think my point still stands because it's a nostalgia-focused reboot movie. So instead of commissioning more Star Wars The Clone Wars, Disney would put the Clone Wars team to work on a superficially similar show with new characters set in this original era. I say original era to mean the era of the original trilogy, not the actual original sequel era they were developing that they did not flesh out at all. There's this thing called the First Order. Oh, okay, well how big is the First Order? Your guess is as good as mine. But those superficial similarities are just that. Star Wars Rebels is far more kid-friendly, and if you ask Disney, more boy-friendly, more akin to the early seasons of Clone Wars, as well as following one team of rebels instead of being an anthology series that jumps around. This, however, wouldn't stop Dave Filoni and his silly ponies from inserting Ahsoka and Captain Rex and Darth Maul into this original trilogy series. Cal Kestis is around, but then after 4 seasons and 4 years of public fan outcry, a viral hashtag campaign, and a COVID-induced revisionist history of the prequel films, the 7th, proper, final Star Wars The Clone Wars season. Produced for Disney's own new streaming service, Disney+. I guess all it took for Star Wars fans to become nostalgic for the prequel era was for it to go away, because the Clone Wars series and movie was only 3 years after Revenge of the Sith, which itself only was 3 years after the previous prequel, and then the previous prequel before that. From 1999 to like 2014, the Clone Wars era was in full effect. People talk a lot about like Y2K nostalgia and questioning why we are still stuck in this era of 80s nostalgia. But the fact of the matter is there are products like My Little Pony, like Ninja Turtles, like Transformers that are always going to come back, but they're going to come back differently. Whereas what started in the 2000s, let's say like very end of 99 and then the very beginning of the year 2000, we got shows like South Park, SpongeBob, Family Guy, Futurama. You can't really be nostalgic for those if they didn't go anywhere. The only issue really with the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars is that they already told their stories in Star Wars Rebels. Can the audience really wonder if Ahsoka or Darth Maul are going to be okay, how they're gonna get out of this one, if we know that they are alive in Star Wars Rebels? in Darth Maul's case, alive in Solo. I've been bringing up Steven Universe a lot towards the tail end of the series. It did kind of pass that baton a little bit, despite being very different, but the comparisons still stand. Similar to Steven, the crew requested an additional or longer season to wrap up all of their storylines that the network rejected, instead putting them to work on a different project, which they then saw as the go-ahead to wrap up all of those stories, only then to be told later that the previous series would be coming back and have to make an epilogue, I guess. Spoilers for Star Wars Rebels, but Darth Maul is stabbed through the stomach, chest. He's stabbed by Obi-Wan. He dies on Tatooine in Obi-Wan's arms. I guess that was Ben Kenobi. This is all before he would return in the final season of Clone Wars, in that weird cameo in Solo, in, I reiterate, his own fucking animated TV show. This mess that we currently live in, that we call Star Wars, is built out of the cancellation of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Because you have to ask yourself, if it was never bought out by Disney, or maybe just bought out a year later, if they did get that 6th season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, would we even get Bo-Katan in The Mandalorian? One of the few arcs to remain with unfinished animation starred a young Boba Fett retrieving his iconic armor and finally striking down Cad Bane in a shootout. And if you wanted to see that story play out, all you would have to do is wait 7 years and finally see it transpire in the shocking revelation of that live-action Boba Fett show where he hangs out with the Spy Kids on motorbikes. So with the exception of Star Wars Rebels, maybe in another lifetime, I think I'm finally ready to watch Star Wars. The truth is, I just don't like leaving stones unturned. The encompassing, crushing weight of there being more Kids' Choice Award ceremonies, of the existence of even more of that mermaid show. No, instead I'm tasked with cleaning up the messes left by the previous guy. You think I'm sitting in this shack in the desert for ambiance? He didn't bother to ask questions. And look where that got him. I'm not stupid enough to leave crucial plot points rotting in my closet for my constituents to find and rat me out. I'm not leaving that unturned. I intend to get more answers. Alright, Mystery Man. It's your lucky day. The only thing this is gonna hurt is your chances of ever passing for 25 again. Now, I'll be honest. I never got to be on the cutting edge of this situation, and my hands are a little occupied at the moment, but I have to know.